Who's going to close the door before I start? Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome members and the public to this evening's meeting of the City Council. I'll now ask my chaplain to open the meeting.
Thank you. A number of you commented on how pleasantly surprised you were that I stayed so long to the last full council meeting. It was deliberate because I wanted to learn about what was going on and get a sense of who you are and perhaps what is important. Tonight, sadly, I have to dash off after I have spoken, as I've got a college course to go to. But you know, I wanted to say that I'm really glad that I stayed last time. I'm glad because I went away inspired. I was inspired by meeting you and chatting to you. I was inspired by hearing people from across the chamber speak passionately and interestingly. And I got a real sense that you care for the people of Cambridge and that you were seeking to make a difference. I was also inspired by the members of the public who, not accustomed to public speaking, spoke passionately about what was on their minds, and so much so, we're looking into the possibility of a community allotment in the grounds of the Good Shepherd Church. Well, this week, it's National Hate Crimes Awareness Week, a week organised by Stop Hate UK, which seeks to inspire and encourage us to stand up against hate and make a difference in our communities. Tomorrow, I'll be joining the pupils of Arbury School, along with the Mayor and the MP, in wearing red and spreading this message. The Chief Executive of Stop Hate UK, Rose Simpkins, was inspired by the American poet and civil rights activist, Mary Angelou. And Mary wrote, "Hate, it has caused a lot of problems in the world, but it has not solved one yet." The message they are hoping that we all get this year is spread love, not hate. The love that they want us to share is not a soppy, sentimental chocolate box and flowers kind of love. It's more important than that. It's the kind of love that St. Paul wrote about in a letter. He said, "Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends." This is the kind of love that inspires and changes. So this evening, like at the last council meeting, I'd like to invite you just to stop, lay down the distractions of the day in anticipation of a very full agenda. Just for a moment, and pause, using your senses and your imagination. Who or what inspired you to come here this evening? Who or what inspired you to become a councillor, to make a difference? Who or what is inspiring you at this moment? And as we pause, let us be inspired by that other great civil rights activist, Martin Luther King. "Darkness cannot drive out darkness," he said. "Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that."
Yeah, thank you, David. We're not expecting the fire alarm to go off, but if it does, please exit at the back and front of the council chamber or the rear of the public gallery and follow the exit signs. For wheelchair users and those with mobility issues, please make your way to the safe waiting area on the Pease Hillside stairwell. Council officers will be on hand to assist. An accessible unisex toilet is located outside the council chamber opposite the members' room. A drinks machine and water dispenser are located in the corridor opposite Committee Room 1. The Council is filming this meeting and a copy will be available to view in the coming days. Can councillors speak into their microphones so that everyone can hear the contributions that are made? Could I ask all councillors to be concise with their contributions and show respect to their fellow members? So, agenda item 1, approval of the minutes. Can I approve the minutes of the council meeting held on the 19th of July 2018, which can be found on pages 9 to 30 of your agenda? Great. Agenda item 2, apologies. Apologies have been received from councillors Tunnicliffe and Pagecroft. Are there further apologies? Councillor Smart.
Kevin Price is working.
Councillor Payne has indicated he should be late.
Okay. So we go on to the Mayor's announcements. The Mayor's Day Out. The annual meeting for senior citizens, annual outing for senior citizens to Felixstowe in August was once again a huge success, and I thank all those councillors that helped with the stewarding. The Chariots of Fire. I was honoured to join the High Sheriff in presenting the awards at this year's event recently. The turnout was fantastic and the event was most enjoyable. Members are reminded of their invitation to this year's annual firework display on Monday the 5th of November on Midsummer Common. The VIP reception starts at 6 in the Cambridge Live tent with the fireworks starting at 7 p.m. A remembrance. Members will be aware that the Remembrance Sunday civic service will take place on Sunday the 11th of November and that it is the 100th anniversary of World War I. Anyone wishing to attend the Great St Mary's Church at 10:55 a.m. is asked to let the Sergeant at Mace know this evening, please. The Deputy Mayor will also be leading the civic procession to church. I will add that you can also contact my PA, Penny, with email her or Gary Clift, and because the spaces will be limited this year because of the 100th anniversary. I shall be laying a wreath on behalf of the city at the War Memorial, and anyone wishing to join me there is very welcome to do so at 10:30 a.m. Advance notice that the preaching of the Shevin sermon will take place on Sunday the 27th of January 2019. Invitations will be sent out nearer the time. Would Council please note the returning officer is required to report that Kelly Green has been elected to the office of Councillor at the by-election for Petersfield on the 13th of September. On behalf of the Council, I welcome Councillor Green and hope you enjoy your time in office. I would like to ask members to declare now any interest in the items on the agenda before us this evening. Members are reminded that they can declare interest at any time during the meeting if anything occurs to them during debates tonight. Agenda item 3.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
I was just going to declare a trustee for Winter Comfort for the OMS in relation to my oral question, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Mr. Mayor, in terms of motion 7B, I work for Daniel Seisner MP.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I will abstain from the vote on 5B. I have an interest.
Councillor Herbert.
I will also abstain on the vote on the remuneration.
Councillor Massey. Same as that. Councillor Thornborough.
In relation to 4E, I own a narrowboat which is moored on private land north of Cambridge.
And Councillor Bajan. Agenda item 3. Public question time. I understand the following people, well, following person, wish to address the meeting. It's Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who haven't been following my social media fun and games over the summer, I've spent most of it in the Cambridgeshire collection, picking up a whole host of wonderful things, including, has anyone ever seen this wonderful proposed Guildhall that we didn't get in 1898? And then this wonderful thing arrived at a naught size at the Museum of Cambridge. I saw it on eBay and thought we need it because it's part of our history, and got it. And so I've gifted it to them. But the question that I wanted to put to yourselves as councillors is, in that large hall that was built in 1862, the only woman whose portrait is on it is Queen Victoria's. There are more Tories who have got portraits in that hall than there are women. How many Tories are there in this room on the council? Exactly. Now, that's not because we've got a shortage of women heroes. Several of you should know who this is. Leah Manning, anyone? That's from the Palmer Clark Archive. Also from the Palmer Clark Archive, there are 40,000 glass plates sitting in there, many of which have not been seen, such as this one. This is Eglantine Jebb, who founded Save the Children, and I paid for a professional artist to colorise that photo. We've also got the lady who built this place and who built this chamber, Florence Ada Keynes, former mayor, first woman to be elected to this council. And then on the other side, we've got Clara Rackham, who certainly on the Labour benches you should be more than familiar with. Now, my point being is those are A2 sized from the very large glass plates that they've got there. Is there anything that the council can do with or without help from wider civic society to at least temporarily, if not permanently, get some of those photos either colorised and put up, or portraits put up, of those women who basically made modern Cambridge? Because the gaps on the wall are a real sore point, and I'd like to think that if we can get the photographs and the pictures of those women who made modern Cambridge, perhaps it can get into the consciousness of the civic mindset of the contribution that they made, and perhaps local government won't be so anonymous as perhaps it has become. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Carpenter. Councillor Smith, would you like to reply?
Right, new seat, new microphone. Seems to be working. Thank you very much, Mr. Carpenter, for your questions. I've been asked to answer this. It does fall across a couple of portfolios, so one of the things we'll need to be doing is discussing some of these ideas between us. First of all, as a feminist and a fellow historian, I particularly appreciate your questions, which relate to these amazing pioneer women which helped to shape not only Cambridge, but often the whole country. While I'm up here, I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank you particularly for two things. First of all, your generosity for giving things to the Museum of Cambridge. That is an amazing image. It's really glorious. But also, you've done a huge amount of work to support a lot of the Vote 100 events this year, and I know that you're continuing to do so. And I know how key you've been in arrangements to celebrate the life of Clara Rackham and the forthcoming Blue Plaque. And I really want to pay tribute to the work you've done there. Well, what can I say? I mean, I completely agree. Our paintings are, as we probably should say, rather unbalanced. It's a bit male and pale, isn't it? And it's completely unrepresentative of Cambridge now, and that's very clear. I'd really like to see a lot more diverse paintings, especially given that we're not short of excellent women to celebrate. I think the key is, and you know me, I'm not one to kind of shoot from the hip, as it were. So what I'd like to do is, rather than giving a kind of set of off-the-cuff answers this evening, I'd like to offer an invitation for you to meet with myself and our relevant officer team to talk through your suggestions in more detail. So let's actually kind of have more discussions to think this through.
Mr. Carpenter, you have 2 minutes speaking time if you wish to use them. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, recommendations of the Executive for adoption. We now turn to item 4A, contained in the separate local plan pack. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Planning Policy and Transport concerning the adoption of the Cambridge local plan. I will ask Councillor Blencoe as the Executive Councillor to introduce this item, if he wishes, and I will allow a speaking time of up to 10 minutes due to the nature of the subject matter. Councillor Blencoe, do you wish to introduce the item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's my humble duty to offer up the Cambridge local plan, what will be 2018, to this full council to be adopted this evening. Councillor Tim Ward presented the submitted local plan in February 2014. At that meeting, having looked at the minutes of it, only 18 of the councillors present today were present at that meeting. It shows the length of time and the change in the council over that time. I think in that just that one aspect, that only 18 of the 42 members currently on the council were present at that meeting. It's been a long process, as many of you clearly know. We have been backwards and forwards with modifications, additional work, answers to questions raised by the Government Inspectorate over this period in time. Clearly, we didn't envisage the examination in public to be as long and to take as long a period as it did, but we are where we are. And it is, I think, for us to look ahead and look to 2031, which is the sort of period this plan is intended to sort of guide the city towards, and make the most of it and actually apply a whole section, a whole set of policies which I think are far more in tune with Cambridge in 2018 than probably had been in 2006, the time of the previous plan adoption. And we do need to move with the times, as everybody clearly knows and tells us frequently. I think one aspect I think needs to be emphasised is that while all manner of organisations, individuals, respected companies and others have visions for this city, have plans for this city, perhaps their own plans, perhaps bigger visionary plans that they see for the city, this Cambridge local plan, which will be for the City of Cambridge, not just for us as the council, has a democratic foundation to it, which I think gives it far more importance and far more credibility as a result. Leading up to the submission meeting in 2014, there were several years of work done on assessing housing need, job need, all sorts of background work, sustainability appraisals and all sorts of work that fed into the preparation of this plan. The officers concerned, some of them are present this evening, have done an awful lot of work over many years to get us to this stage. Some have sat through the whole period of preparing the submission, fighting our case at the examination, arguing our case with well-paid barristers, solicitors, lawyers from different representations, and they have sat through patiently, diligently, and I think with great professionalism, and done this city proud. And I'd like to thank them all for that over this period of time. And I hope they will continue to work with us and keep the policies in our minds and update when we need to. But in terms of the point about the democratic, I think, foundation, it is important because we will now, when this is, I hope, adopted by full council, be able to hold this plan up, and for every person, company, individuals and groups with interests in the city, they will have to follow this plan, just as we, as the council, have produced and put it forward and hope for it to be adopted. But it will apply across the board. It is the guide for this city, it is the strategy for this city, and it has that foundation at its heart. And I think those of you remember trawling through some of the representations, the thousands and thousands of representations on all the various consultation stages prior to 2014 will remember how much contribution was made by all manner of representations at that time. And we obviously formulated the plan based on that, but also with a vision and with an evidence-based vision for the city. There is an awful lot in the plan, as those of you who've managed to read through some of it will have seen. The sections I think are highly relevant to today's issues that we face within our city, within our wards, and are familiar with. Interestingly, one of the speakers who addressed the February 2014 meeting was a certain Mr. Bagent, who we all know and love, and obviously that was about Ridgeons. I looked at the remarks he made, and yes, pertinent remarks, and he's still making the remarks about Ridgeons today. So I think that shows his commitment, and I think that just shows the example of where some of that policy basis came from. Some of you may wish to sort of home in on one or two of the aspects that you have taken a keen interest in, but in terms of where we are, clearly the spatial strategy is very important in terms of how we plan for jobs, for housing, particularly in the city, how we maintain the numbers of affordable housing units and overall housing units within a city which has a clear housing problem at this time. We need to obviously work sensibly on the jobs front in terms of working where sensible allocations of new employment can be sustained, and we clearly need to work with our colleagues in South Cambridgeshire on both employment and housing, and that has been, I think, a healthy partnership over recent years, and it will continue under the Greater Cambridgeshire Planning Service, and both in practical terms and in a preparation of a joint plan up to 2050, which will come forward at some point in late next year. But in terms of some of the detail, clearly there are areas of the city which we've homed in on for potential change, for potential development. In terms of some of the work that's already been done, some of the councillors have been working on areas of the city, the Grafton area, Mitchum's Corner, land north of Cherry Hinton, the Cambridge Northern Fringe. Each will exercise many of us in the coming months, and in terms of the bid particularly, and obviously the planning process behind that. There are opportunity areas, Mill Road. We still have the Eastern Gate opportunity area, which is the sort of Elizabeth Way end of Newmarket Road on the table, and we need to obviously be aware of our commitments that are continuing across both previous discussions and today's local plan. But there's also obviously that we get into the detail in terms of dealing with sustainability, particularly how we manage resources, how we respond to climate change, how we encourage further energy efficiency, carbon reduction, how we deal with contaminated land in this city, where we do have brownfield parcels of land still to be developed. We will obviously have to deal with those in terms of contamination. Air quality has been on the agenda for many years and will continue to be, I think, a high priority for this council, and that has policy statements to back up our sort of approach. In terms of housing, obviously we've maintained, this was a cross-party view and always has been, I think, of a 40% threshold on major sites for affordable housing. We are trying to maintain a balance within the city so that people can live here at all income levels and all in different circumstances. It can't be just a city for the rich. It's got to be a city that's balanced and can maintain a housing provision for all our citizens and all their family to come forward in the future. I think that's been an important part of our approach for many years and will continue to be so. There's also obviously references to, is that 30 seconds to go? Okay, do I have a chance to come back at the end? Do I have a chance to come back at the end?
Yes, you will have the right reply.
In which case, that's obviously just one of the aspects of the sort of nuts and bolts of the policy areas. There are far more that people may wish to mention and sort of home in on. But in terms of the local plan, I think this is a sound local plan, and clearly the inspector agrees. After many months, they finally agreed. And I recommend this local plan for formal adoption by the full council as of tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The chaplain has gone, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that because of the unholy length of time this plan has taken and it's been delayed through its inspection, this is a plan that has a somewhat checkered history of political support. The draft plan, as Councillor Blanco has said, was submitted under our administration of the council, and actually, Councillor Blanco, if you look at the attendance list at the meeting, you'll see that at the time the Labour group here didn't vote for it, you abstained. Likewise, the sister draft local plan for South Cambridgeshire was not actually supported by the Liberal Democrat opposition there. I'm using these words generously. I'm genuinely happy to see that both oppositions at that time have subsequently changed their view, and I'm equally happy to say that my group hasn't changed its view either, despite now being in opposition. We welcome and support the adoption of this plan, especially because a very large part of the work on the plan, as Councillor Blanco has observed, was carried out under our administration. I would like to add my thanks to the officers involved in that, and I would like in particular to recognise Sarah Saunders and her team and their colleagues who have seen it through from beginning to end. It's been a stupendous task, probably tougher than any of us realised at the beginning. I would also like to recognise, as Councillor Blanco has also done, the former councillors from our group, Councillor Reid and Councillor Tim Ward, both of whom had prominent member roles in leading the work. And in particular, I'm sure that Tim Ward would take special satisfaction from the inclusion and the endurance of the protection for pubs that the plan still now includes. Mr. Mayor, the overwhelming reason for supporting this plan is that it enables the continued supply of new homes in the city, and it does so in a way which continues to respect the character of our city. If we don't do this, we will further remove existing housing in Cambridge from what is affordable, and we will start to choke off the thriving businesses which have contributed so much to the area's prosperity and which already struggle with recruitment. At the same time as developing this local plan, we on this side, with partners, also succeeded in concluding the largest city deal anywhere in the country, largely for the purposes of transport improvement. We needed this to support this local plan. Provided we use this well, we are in the enviable position, from the perspective of much of the rest of the country, of having the wherewithal to make a good job of growing Greater Cambridge in a sustainable and connected way. What concerns me when I think about the alternative to this plan is that Cambridge should become a steadily more socially exclusive and surreal place. Great to visit, but not possible to live in for people from many walks of life. And it should be our task to keep Cambridge a real, live, balanced, open community, not just a British Venice, much though we might prize our heritage and the natural environment. I'm convinced that it is not to work for the best interests of our city to fight against the tide of change. All sorts of unintended consequences will arise from that. Not only for Cambridge, but it probably won't even result in many of the comparable advantages popping up elsewhere in the region or even in the country, as things that get suppressed here have a habit of happening internationally, in Boston, in San Francisco, in Singapore or Shanghai. I think our role with our local planning is to channel, to shape, to tame and to manage our growth pressures so they work fairly for people and for our environment. As I read the report of the Independent Economic Review, there's clearly more to be done. It's already necessary to review this plan, as we've committed to start doing with South Cambridgeshire next year. Let's hope the Planning Inspectorate will have got resourced and organised better to do a better job than have a plan next time which takes 7 years to get approved and just last for a 13-year period after that. My aspiration is that we start with a big public conversation about the broad shape of the next stage of Cambridge's continuing evolution, akin to the Cambridge Futures exercise almost 20 years ago. Such modelling of alternative concepts with their pros and their cons has recently been restarted and is referred to in the Economic Review, but this ought to be used to elicit public input at the start of the next local plan to help us achieve a conscious sense of the overall direction that we're going in. In the meantime, Mr. Mayor, we must support this local plan as a significant step, and I would urge others to do so.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I declare an interest as chair of the Cherryington Residents Association. As Councillor Blencoe mentioned earlier, there's going to be a huge development in Cherryington. The press keeps saying 1,200 homes in Cherryington, but it's not 1,200, it's under 1,200, it's more like 800. But as has been mentioned earlier, it's not just housing, it's transport as well. And we all know that this city is blighted by the transport infrastructure, which has never been addressed. Now, with this new development that's planned north of Cherryington, there is an opportunity to try and alleviate this transport. We've already had one fight with the County Council over the transport, as they believed a north-through road was the agreeable way to deal with 1,200 homes. Everybody in Cherryington knows it needs a distributor road, a spine road, a peripheral road, whatever these traffic people want to call it. But there's the opportunity to build a road around this development which will alleviate the traffic from Cherryington, which will mean the traffic on this development can move freely around the city as well. So I would ask that as this plan draws near and gets in the microscope, that we do ensure that this peripheral distributor road is built round this new estate, enabling the transport not to be congested, as we found out with all of the new developments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Herbert.
Just briefly, I think it is, as has been said by others, a time to thank the officer team, including Caroline Hunt, who's also here today, as well as Sarah Saunders. And it has required a huge amount of patience, given just the length of time that the inspection has taken. So during that period, we've continued to have particularly fast jobs growth in the high-tech sector, growing at around 5% a year. And we've had greater challenges from affordable housing, which point us to having to build far more affordable housing for rent. I'm glad that we've been able to deliver on our existing policies of very close to 40% in all new developments. And I'm also glad that we'll now be able to extend affordable housing into smaller developments as a result of this, and improve space standards. I am also happy that it is still a partnership. So that it's a partnership with South Cambridgeshire and ourselves is critical. The nature of the plans are that they are being developed together. And the development now of Cambourne, Bourne, Northstowe and Waterbeach are as critical to this city as are the proposals for additional housing here. So given that the rate of build out in South Cambridgeshire and by the University in North West has been fast, and the prospect of Darwin Green and other sites starting, we really do need to see house building in South Cambridgeshire accelerate. As both Councillor Blencowe and Councillor Bigg have said, it is a partnership, and we now need to work with South Cambridgeshire looking ahead. Assisted by the investment by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, we really do need to improve connectivity. And we also need to be thinking about planning on a broader horizon. There is no reason why we can't be planning from Mildenhall right across to St Neots. If we've got properly connected communities and building on existing market towns, they have got a really big part to play in the future, including spreading the benefits of growth and spreading jobs from this city. So in a role that I have on the Combined Authority, I'll be also making sure that that broader planning is part of the next phase, because whilst at the heart of it is our partnership with South Cambridgeshire, we do need to build that broader partnership well beyond that area, because that is the geography of housing and jobs for the future.
And thank you for keeping to time, Councillor Herbert. Councillor Hipkin.
Yes, I'd like to add my thanks and compliments to the joint planning teams of the City Council and South Cambs. I think Sarah and Caroline have worked very productively together during a very long period when they have been subject to a number of, shall I say, challenges with respect to the plan, but they have guided it steadily and consistently, and it's emerged as a document which many of you will want to celebrate. I think it's important to remember that the local plan is something of an aspiration rather than a plan in any meaningful sense. For example, you can talk as much as you like about the number of houses that you think the city needs. But in fact, the question of the number of houses is not in the keep of the City Council, it's in the keep of the market and of the development industry. As I was coming home from London, coming back to Cambridge from London today, reading the London Evening Standard, I was surprised to see that Sadiq Khan is already extremely troubled by the fact that his own local plan for London, as far as housing is concerned, is short on housing by 50%. That is to say, only half of the houses which he hoped would be built have actually been built. And he quite rightly attributes this failure to fulfill the housing demand and the housing need in London to the fact that the development industry just doesn't regard that degree of housing as profitable. So let's remember that we live in a capitalist society and that the capitalist ethic is still the determinant one. Having said that, I think it would be churlish of me and others not to be grateful for the fact that the green belt has been largely retained, intact, and that Cambridge continues to be surrounded by green and pleasant open land. And this is one of the attributes of the city which many of us will, to our dying day, fight to protect. It's interesting, I think, in the report to see what, again, the employment numbers envisaged are when, as we've been reminded by the Independent Economic Review, which the Combined Authority has produced, this suggests that we have seriously underestimated, in relying upon official employment figures, we have seriously underestimated the degree to which the Cambridge economy will grow in the next few years. And if it does grow much in excess of what's envisaged in the local plan, the implications for the housing crisis will be even worse than they would otherwise be. And of course, it is going to exacerbate the problems of congestion and so on, because more and more of these employees who are joining the Cambridge economy will not be living in the city and will not be able to live in the city. So they will become part of that vast army of commuters who on a daily basis clog our roads as they seek to get into the city. I finally would like to say that I think all of us should hold our breath with respect to this local plan. It is a bold vision in many ways. It was never to my taste or my liking that we embarked on the development of the city in the way that we have, but there it is. You know, some battles you lose, and that one I certainly lost. This is a growing city, but I think that the early review that has been promised, and I believe it starts next year, so it is extremely early, we'll be looking at where perhaps the plan is already showing signs of stress. And I, for one, believe that the uncertainty surrounding Brexit will certainly mean that we'll have to revise a great deal of our thinking about how this city is going to develop in the coming years.
Thank you. Councillor Gillespie.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'll declare an interest as I work for the University of Cambridge. In short, there are parts of the plan that I'm not happy with, but I say that a lot of work and care has gone into it, and there's a lot that is good. It's not the stage of the process to oppose it, so I'll be voting to support it as well.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, I too would like to add my thanks to all those people who've worked so hard on such an enormous document. Watching the poor person who was delivering it staggering down the drive under the weight of them suddenly told me before I actually opened the door what it was and how complicated it was going to be. So certainly all those people involved in that through the years need thanking for that. I think it's important that I mentioned the land north of Cherry Hinton is an important factor for us. I've had many residents contact me who are very concerned about the impact of such a large development on the doorstep. In actual fact, I've had a number of emails today and 2 people stopped me before I got here. But as Councillor Ashton said, and he's quite right, and it centres mostly around there, it's not unheard of to take 35 minutes to get through Cherry Hinton High Street. That's a daily occurrence. It's just taken me over 40 minutes to get here from Cherry Hinton today. I'm extremely concerned, as are the residents, where is all that traffic going to go? And if you superimpose that development on the existing Cherry Hinton, it's as big as the existing Cherry Hinton. It's huge. It's going to impact a lot. And I think we have to be extraordinarily careful how we integrate that with the existing community so it isn't completely and totally overwhelmed, but becomes part of the infrastructure and becomes part of the existing village that we've all come to know and love, and we end up with one community, not 2 separate ones. That's going to take some doing, and I think it's important to note that there are many people in Cherry Hinton who are concerned about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dryden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since my 2 other ward colleagues spoke, I thought I'd better on this. Going back on the traffic, and I'm going to point on my 2 colleagues on the Cherry Hinton. I was on the planning committee 20 odd years ago when I first came to council, and development in Cherry Hinton then, and it was discussed then about the traffic problems we were going to get in that area. And we had concerns then, and now it's going to be worse. So I hope we do concentrate on transport around that area. But one thing I am glad about, though, the Councillor Ashton said about 800 houses. Well, there's more than that if you count the Self-Cams part of Tevisham, which is to be part of that development as well. with the Cambridge City Council and the South Cambs with their local plan. It mirrors each other, so I think there might be more hope that we work together when we're on the borders, that we can work together and try and improve the plans. I think transport should come first. A lot of the time, these developments get put first, built, and then we think about transport afterwards, which I think is the horse before the cart. Thank you.
Councillor Dill.
Thank you, Mayor. I think probably like a lot of councillors here today, I actually find myself inheriting this plan, but I should actually also give thanks to colleagues both here and from the past, and for all the officers for their hard work throughout this process. I'd like to congratulate them on delivering a local plan which should hopefully help to continue to keep Cambridge as a city that's growing and thriving, whilst also seeking to address the housing shortage which requires such urgent attention. I do share the concerns raised by a number of colleagues regarding the threat to the development of our transport infrastructure. I appreciate that cannot be included in this plan, but its success depends upon it. Sadly, also, much of that now depends on the regional mayor and his combined authority, and that is something that causes concern. However, more locally and more optimistically, I am particularly excited to see the plan approved as it enables the adoption of the Mitchum's Corner supplementary planning document as highlighted in section 4 of Appendix 6. Through the passionate and hard work of the Friends of Mitchum's Corner, this area now represents a fantastic opportunity for the city, allowing us to build an exciting gateway for the city centre and expanding the important social hub for my area. I now look to the Council to help us bring together the stakeholders and commission the urban design work required to build momentum on this potentially transformative project. I'm pleased to support the plan and I look forward to making it a success.
Thank you. Councillor Blanco, there seems to be no other indications. Councillor Blanco, do you wish the right of reply?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just coming back to one or two comments that have come through thus far in the discussion. This local plan, the city local plan, and for that matter, the South Cambridgeshire local plan, is based on the current transport strategy for this county, and it is based on a strategy that has been both approved by us as the local authorities and, more importantly, by the government inspector through the examination in public process. They believe, there was a lot of challenge on various aspects of some of the site allocations within the Greater Cambridge area, but the government inspector, having taken a long time to do so, has actually given us endorsement that those policy areas and allocation areas are deliverable. So let's be clear on that point. They are both in terms of the local authorities and the government inspector, representing the national government in this case, as deliverable within this time period. I think that's important to make clear. And it is this time period we're talking about. We're talking to 2031. Even now, yes, we might be looking at working together with South Cambridgeshire colleagues towards the end of next year about a joint plan preparation for even further than that. But let's be clear, it may be 12, 13 years ahead, but it's still a long period in the Cambridge history and in terms of how we deal with the practicalities of Cambridge growth and Cambridge pressures. And as I pointed out, this local plan is the plan for the city. We, as the council, are responsible for its production and its adoption, but it applies to everybody with interest in this city, to individuals, to companies who are based here, to everybody who has an interest in this city. It is the democratically agreed plan for the city up to 2031. And yes, we may find that various studies and various aspirations seem to want to run ahead of that, but actually we have a plan here that is robust and has been approved by the National Inspector, and we will hold it to account, and we will support it and back it up and expect everybody with these interests in the city to accept it as the democratically agreed foundation for the strategy for the city. I think that's important. I as I say, people have referred to one or two individual aspects, and over time I think we'll be having various briefings on some of those so that people who are less familiar with some of this planning history can get to grips with how they, as practical ward representatives, can represent their residents and area with the plans in mind, so that people do come and quote current, as in this document's policies to us at planning committees in the next few months, so they know what they're talking about and so they can explain to residents and others what they're talking about. And that is the practicality of it, and that's how it will be rolled out. And that will be, of course, large sites, smaller sites, and all sorts of various sort of proposals that fall under these sort of policy areas. And that will be of interest to us all on the planning committee, but it will be interest to everybody, I think, with a role in their wards and a role to represent, obviously, all those interests in their wards on planning matters. I thoroughly recommend this Local Plan 2018 to the Council for adoption, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blanco. I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendation? Looks like unanimous to me, doesn't it? Those against? Those against? Abstentions? Please could councillors retain their copies of the local plan documentation until the planning policy team send out official copies in due course. We now turn to item 4B on pages 31 to 111 of the agenda. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Housing concerning the Housing Revenue Account Medium-Term Financial Strategy. I will ask Councillor Johnson, as the Executive Councillor, to introduce this item if he wishes, and I will allow a speaking time of up to 10 minutes due to the nature of the subject matter. Councillor Johnson, do you wish to introduce this item?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor, and rest assured I will not need the full 10 minutes. Before I start, I would, I think even though he's not here this evening, I'd like to pay tribute to my predecessor, Councillor Price, and thank him for the huge contribution to the housing portfolio he has made over the last 4 years. I think the city owes him a great deal of gratitude for the important and vital work he undertook to boost the numbers of badly needed new council homes, with nearly 250 built since 2014, and of course being part of the negotiating team with Councillor Herbert and others with government, making the arguments and holding out for funding under the devolution agreement to construct 500 new council homes. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but amongst the many interesting items of attire within Kevin's wardrobe, Councillor Price would often turn up at functions wearing a t-shirt which had on it, "Build more bloody council houses." Thanks to him, we have and we will. I think that's one of his more milder sayings. Mr Mayor, the HRA Medium-Term Financial Strategy provides an opportunity to examine the financial assumptions which underpin the HRA budget for the current financial year, to restate the budget for the current year, highlighting only significant and exceptional in-year changes for approval, and sets a scene for the 2019-20 budget within the context of our long-term HRA business plan. Following consideration of the MTFS report and unanimous approval from the Housing Scrutiny Committee, Council is being recommended to approve the changes to capital budgets as specified in Appendices E and H, summarised in sections 6 and 7 of the report. In terms of highlights, the MTFS provides £100,000 within the revenue budget for undertaking stock condition surveys, the findings of which will influence a strategic review of planned investment in our housing stock in 1920 and onwards, with an inclusion of £1 million within the capital budget for 5 years from 1920 to undertake the prioritised estate investment arising from the external estates and common parts surveys. It approves additional funding within the Housing Capital Investment Plan of £432,000 plus associated fees and overheads for identified fire safety works across our housing stock. There are updated figures in respect of the Housing Capital Investment Plan regarding new build schemes and earmarks funding for potential future projects. and capital financing has also been updated in respect of revised assumptions regarding right to buy and other capital receipts, grants, revenue funding of capital expenditure and borrowing requirements. So, Mr Mayor, I hope that we can replicate what happened at Housing Scrutiny Committee and have a unanimous showing.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Is there any debate? Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, before I start my comments, I also would like to formally recall the work of Councillor Price as the Executive Councillor for Housing, and it is a real shame that he's not present in the chamber this evening. I have to say I didn't agree with many of the actions and policies that Councillor Price undertook during his period as Executive Councillor, such as deciding to house homeless people up to 50 miles away from this city. But I do recognise that in his heart, Councillor Price had the concerns of the city in terms of delivering on housing, and he had the devotion and he had the energy to try and deliver that. And I hope the current Executive Councillor is able to stand up to that high bar that Councillor Price put in terms of that passion. So turning now to the medium-term financial strategy, clearly as one reads the document, Mr Mayor, you see that the key theme is the authority's delivery of 500 council houses from the default funding. And so far, we've delivered 2. We're over 1.5 years into this project, we've delivered 2. Indeed, of the 317 homes that have been built since 2012, only 39 of them were commenced under the ruling group. Unless you want to take credit for Water Lane, unless you want to take credit for the Southern Fringe, if you look at the numbers in the report, only 39 were commenced under your ruling. That, Mr Mayor, and I'm not great on maths, but that's 10 houses per year. 10 houses per year. And the reason I make this point, Mr Mayor, is that actually everything doesn't bode well in the rosy world of the delivery of the 500 council houses, that those people on our housing register are expecting us to deliver for them. And the reason I say that, Mr Mayor, is we have yet to identify where 100 of these houses are going to be built. Some site, somewhere in the city. I don't know where. Executive Councillor wasn't keen to tell me. Where is this site? Where are we going to deliver 100 houses of the 500? We've only identified 400 so far. And, Mr Mayor, the ruling group claims there's no need to laugh, because actually those 2,500 people on the register aren't laughing. They're not laughing when you fail to deliver the 500 homes. And the ruling group say, Mr Mayor, that actually vital in delivering the 500 homes is our joint venture with the hard-nosed commercial property developer. And this is evidenced, Mr Mayor, by the decision to buy the Ridgeon site, as been referenced this evening. Not bought by the joint venture partnership, by the way, but bought by the council general fund and the HRA. 28 million that cost us. So we're now speculative commercial property developers. And clearly we've been influenced by our joint venture property developer, because we've suddenly decided we're not going to deliver 50% affordable housing on this site. We're only going to deliver 40%. We can't even get to the 50% we had on the Mill Road Depot. And it gets better, Mr Mayor. This new community won't even have a dedicated community facility. They're expected to go over the bridge to Mill Road. And it gets even better, because they won't have a bridge that they could cycle over from the Ridgeon site to the Mill Road Depot, because that's been scrapped as well. So what worries me, Mr Mayor, is actually what it shows is the short-term decisions that we're taking, influenced by our JV property developer partner, will have long-term negative impacts for this city and our residents. But what's more worrying, Mr Mayor, is what's not in the document. There's no reference to helping residents, typically young professionals, teachers, nurses. I know you've heard me say it before, and I'll keep saying it because they are a key component of this city, on how they can rent 30 more seconds, Mr. Mayor, on how they can rent in this city. There's no reference to creative solutions to getting the homeless off the streets, such as Housing First. There's no reference to the foundations of how we deliver another 2,000 council houses to solve this housing register problem. And not only that, Mr. Mayor, we have a ticking time bomb. We have a ticking time bomb in the fact that we have our own estate that is ageing and will need replacing. And whilst there are some short measures introduced in this document, there are no long-term measures to actually address that issue. So, Mr. Mayor, if I could just summarise by saying, Mr. Mayor, I'll come back to the point I made about executive councillors. I hope the new executive councillor will take a more liberal view and a more liberal approach to policy and embrace ideas from across the chamber, ideas that many residents of this city are demanding that you support and deliver on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Please. Councillor Herbert.
What a carping, negative, nasty contribution that was. We're 18 months into the funding. I don't know how good Councillor Cantrell is at building homes and how quickly he can get hold of sites. But if you could just, with the ability that you have with your investments, Councillor Cantrell, consider the option of how long it would take you to get a site ready, to get planning permission, to get the funding together, to involve the community, and then to actually build. It isn't possible often to build within 18 months. Your negativity suggests that you want us to fail. There wasn't a word of sort of, oh, well, I'd suggest you do this, or this is another good idea I've got about building. No, it was all trying to sort of will, almost divine a failure in 4 or 5 years' time. So Councillor Cantrell in another meeting said, we shouldn't, well, one meeting he says, what we want you to do is invest more in housing and housing land. Oh, don't invest in the Ridgeon site. That's so close to the Mill Road depot, it's too big a risk. You said that, Councillor Cantrell. We are investing in land to build council houses. We are building 50% at Mill Road. We do roughly know where the other 100 are going to go, but we have to get the plans together. There's no point in us going out to the community until we're actually clear where we're going. You, along with Councillor Hipkin and myself, went to see the last day of Mill Road Depot. Do you remember? Go back and look at it now. All right. You will see that there is a site there where housing will be built very soon. Are you happy about that? I hope so. Clearly not, because you haven't actually responded positively. So the Ridgeon's purchase, which you say was a bad idea, is going to deliver housing. It will also deliver a community facility. You watch, you see what we bring forward. It wasn't all going to be at Mill Road. It never was. So just see what comes out of that. Stop being so negative. In your whole speech, you didn't even come to the changes that mean that the HRA is now in a far better state. Changes that happened at the end of the coalition government, but largely under Osborne, are not going to happen. A lot of the risk that was in the HRA has been taken out. We're now able to, in the future, to do far more. No reference by you on that. No reference either about Theresa May's finally saying that she's going to get rid of the HRA cap. That is a major change. Did it happen under the coalition? No. Did it happen under the city deal? No. Did it happen under devolution? No. Face up to the opportunities rather than be such a carping person.
Councillor Dryden.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The reason I'm getting up, Councillor Cantrell asked why I was laughing. Because you stand up there like a comedian, that's why I was laughing. And I wish you could have said things like you done them when you was in opposition, or done something when you was in leading the council, in control. And I think really the only reason for that speech you'll give us is because when you want to stand as an MP in a future election. That's all it's about.
It was through me. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to remind the Liberal Democrats when they were here running the council about Water Lane. You were going to throw out all the people and make them homeless or go into a home or whatever. We lost people who passed away because of all the stress you done. You didn't give them no notice. We had to have meetings to get these people to be able to understand what was happening. A lot of people had lived there 30, 40 years and you were just going to demolish their homes without proper consultation. So let's remember what the Liberal Democrats did for housing in Cambridge, shall we?
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just echo Councillor Bird's comments as well. What happened in Cherry Hinton? When we talk about we need housing for people, what did they do in Cherry Hinton? Bungalows, council-owned land, sold it off to developer. The people who lived in there, old people, evicted. No meetings taking place until we dragged the Liberal Democrats to the meetings. Then we said, could they move back into these wonderful new apartments that were being built? No, you're not eligible to move into them. We'll move you elsewhere across the city. So again, the Liberal Democrats need to think about when they talk about they are the party who are going to look after the old, the frail, the people who need houses. They had the chance on council-owned land to build 100% council housing, and they never did. In fact, they evicted people out of those houses and didn't give them the chance to come back. So shame on them for trying to say what we're doing.
I can see you champion at the bit, Councillor Gonson. Do you wish the right of reply?
I do. I mean, I'd just like to thank my colleagues because I think, you know, they really encapsulated the ridiculous position, unfortunately, from Councillor Cantor in regards to how we are progressing as a council in delivering the 500 houses. Because let's forget, just in case they've forgotten, let's remember, that's just in case they've forgotten, that we got £70 million from government to build the 500 houses as part of the devolution deal. And what did the Liberal Democrats do? They implored us not to sign that agreement. They abstained from that agreement, and they did not want us to have a share of the money to build the houses that actually will make a difference to people's lives in this city, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I will now go to the vote. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendation? And those against? Abstentions? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. We now turn to agenda item 4C on pages 113 to 135. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources for the Treasury Management Half-Yearly Update Report 2018-19. Does Councillor Robertson wish to introduce this item?
Well, at this point I normally say no, but on this occasion the report is normally routine, and it's important, but it's routine. This time there are a couple of changes which I just need to draw to your attention. Firstly, there's been some money market fund regulations introduced, and we're not quite clear how they're going to impact us on this yet, but the recommendations are to adjust our counterparty limits and our counterparty limits in items 2.5 and 2.6 on page 116. Over and above that, a much more interesting proposal is in the three paragraphs before that, 2, 3 and 4, is to invest up to £5 million in the future business centre run by Alia on King's Hedges Road. Now this is a very interesting project they're running up there. They develop new ventures and they help new ventures and new employment develop by providing the opportunity for business premises. Very much of part of what their work is doing is helping develop the economy and job markets in our city, which is exactly what this group wants us to do as well. So that we would be doing that by helping them with this investment. We would also be enhancing our income we achieve from our cash balances, and thereby achieving a dual goal with the investment and job creation. So those are the two new items attached to the Treasury Management, but I would ask you to approve the whole package, please.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there any debate? Councillor DL.
Thank you, Matt. I'd also like to thank the officers for this report. We have noted there was also a breach of the county party limits disclosed, but we are satisfied that was a conscious decision undertaken for legitimate reasons and reported correctly. We are assured that the policies are being in turn being updated to prevent such breaches from happening again in the future. And also, though, building on the comments that Councillor Robertson made, we'd like to commend the opportunity for investment with Alia Limited, as detailed in section 8 of the report. Although due diligence is still required, this does appear to be a great opportunity for a mixed incentive investment, which could provide greater returns than our banking deposits, whilst also supporting a great local initiative which has fostered innovation and helped generate jobs for our area. Furthermore, we would recommend that the Council remains vigilant for similar opportunities in the future. I'm sure we'd all much rather invest in our city where possible than into commercial property over 20 miles away, such as the B&Q in Haverhill. On this basis, we are happy to support the recommendations as set to this Council.
Councillor Sargent.
Well, I could say, I just want to say oh dear, really, because I wasn't even a councillor when the Lib Dems are harping on about Haverhill. Yeah? When Comrade Chancellor, Councillor George Owers took over in charge of the finances of this council, he found that we were not investing the reserves, yeah? We were just holding it in low interest accounts, okay? And the Lib Dems have harped on about Haverhill for the last 3 years, yeah? Well, what did they do when they were running the council? Did they invest money locally? I've checked with the Cambridge Building Society. No, they didn't. I spoke to the manager of the Iceland store on Histon Road, and he knows nothing about investments in Iceland, which I understand happened under the Liberal Democrats. Is that right? Oh, sorry, I'm told it's not Iceland in Histon Road. Perhaps it's Iceland on the way to Haverhill. I didn't actually get geography at O-level, but I think actually Iceland is further afield than actually Haverhill. Yeah? We've invested vast amounts of our reserves in various things which, instead of bringing in 1%, as we had under the Liberal Democrats, are bringing in 5%, bringing in more than £1 million to the council coffers, which has meant we've been able to actually preserve services. If the Liberal Democrats had still been in charge of this council, we would have had to lose services. I commend very much the work of the Labour Council since they took over in 2014, and we've invested for the benefit of the people of Cambridge, not in Iceland, and perhaps there are even places further afield.
Councillor Bick.
It's great to be able to come back and respond to that. I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, that there surely must come a time, and I think it's probably happened some time ago, in fact, that the Labour Party opposite should stop trying to justify their record by myths and misrepresentations of an economic time that was very different from now. The point that Councillor DL was making, and it is an extremely valid one, is that an investment which can both give a return to this council and secure an intrinsic benefit to this city through its economic development and economic health and social benefit is surely a better investment than investment that is made to the benefit of another part of the country entirely, which we have limited connection with. Going for two benefits instead of one is something we will hold out for every time we have the chance, and you need to get used to that.
Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought I'd come back on this point in terms of delivering for the people of the city. And, you know, the councillor opposite talks about the fact that all this great return enables us to deliver for the people of the city. Well, the council has that unique thing. It has a financial capital, and it also has social and moral capital. And if you look, I think you have spent a bit too long with your hard-nosed Conservative property joint venture partners. Just look at shop mobility. Just look at what you've done on shop mobility. And even when you had the opportunity, even when you had the opportunity to do a U-turn, you only do a half U-turn. And that you will regret, because actually the people of the Cambridge are looking at you, and those actions sail. And just on Haverhill and B&Q, Mr. Mayor, since it is Treasury Management, as the leader points out, it's interesting that the DIY sector's not doing too well at the moment, as we see with Homebase in Cambridge. So I wouldn't necessarily be smiling on your great yield you're getting from the B&Q outlet at Haverhill, because time will tell whether that investment is a really good one or not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gillespie. Councillor Gillespie, do you want to use the microphone? Or is it not working?
None of these work, Mr. Mayor. This one works. As well as investing in business and training, Ali also hosts a number of very worthwhile social enterprises, and I want to bring attention to their work in Norfolk Street to look at innovative solutions to hunger amongst homelessness and suicide and depression among men. They work in a way that will be a great asset to Cambridge, and I think that is a good investment in Cambridge.
Councillor Smart.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing to say, but I'd like to thank the Lib Dems really, because talking about treasury management, it truly was you that brought me into politics as I was coming to the end of my second term at St Matthew's Primary School as Chair of Governors there, and I thought, what do I do next? And standing as a Labour councillor seemed to be a good thing to do, but the mess that you made of the treasury management in Cambridge, and I've not got a very good memory sometimes, but I can remember not only the Iceland debacle, but the, what was it, the folk festival lost money, 600,000 was it? The miscalculation of how much money was in the bank by $1 million or something that you miscounted, maybe more. So the thing I said to residents on the doorstep was, I'd like to be part of a robust administration for Cambridge, and that's what I continue to do. And, you know, and the other thing I'd just like to say is, Councillor Cantrell, you've twice said now that somebody's smiling. Maybe it's not about the content, but about your delivery.
Councillor Robertson, do you wish to... Was there a hand up behind there?
I'm winding up.
I didn't see it.
I think it's time to wind up. I think we've dealt with this issue. Can you please put it to the vote? Thank you.
I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendation? So it's unanimous, so there's no point in the against vote. So. We now turn to agenda item 4D on pages 137 to 192. Recommendation of the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources for the General Fund Medium-Term Financial Strategy. I will ask Councillor Robertson as the Executive Councillor to introduce this item if he wishes, and I will allow a speaking time of up to 10 minutes due to the nature of the subject matter. Councillor Robertson, do you wish to introduce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the annual medium-term financial strategy, the MTFS, it sets out to predict the finances of Cambridge City Council for the next 5 years. Assumptions and forecasts are thoroughly reviewed and applied to the years ahead so that we can create and share a good guide to the Council's future finances. Now, this provides a context within which we can take appropriate decisions to manage our finances and provide high-quality services, including a level of non-statutory services most councils get nowhere near funding. Yet, to fund these services, we are faced with the possibility of increased costs and reduced income. A big problem in planning our finances is the major uncertainty on future income. Now, the government continues to emphasise austerity, despite what the Prime Minister seems to be saying, and a major impact for Cambridge is that our revenue support grant has been reducing year by year, and in fact we will receive nothing at all from next April, and only 5 years ago we received £5.6 million just in 1 year. So there's been cumulative damage caused by the government's austerity programme over the past 8 years, including the years of coalition, of course. It has hindered the ability of local authorities to provide services and at the same time brought hardship to those who are less well off. And that in turn has led to more work being needed from us to assist those people. The government has a series of overlapping and slow-moving local government financial reviews underway, including on fair funding, on the future of new homes bonus, and on business rates. This means we face extensive uncertainty as to the funding we can hope to receive from those sources. Leaving the EU will doubtless put pressure on the UK economy, but how seriously is not known, and even a place like Cambridge with its robust economy may well suffer a serious downturn. This may in turn lead to a reduction in important income streams to the City Council, such as rents from our commercial property and charges in our car parks. Now, we can anticipate growth in council tax with the continued construction of new homes, including R500, in the city. But this also brings with it increased costs, such as providing them with refuse bins and emptying them each week. The strong growth in provision of student housing is particularly burdensome, as we get no council tax income from students, yet we're required to provide them with a full range of services. Now, that's not right, and something's going to have to be done about that. With these pressures on us to provide quality services to more people and businesses and share the prosperity of the city, it has been essential to develop strategy so that it is possible to set balanced budgets each year. And this year, we were asked the heads of service to plan ahead more rigorously than ever, to identify pressures on the cost of providing services into the future and seek opportunities to develop income. This exercise added to the review of key assumptions, such as on expected levels of general and pay inflation. And now this has produced a forecast, which is the MTFS, which indicates that the scale of the pressures for the next 5 years have grown. So, with uncertain income streams and rising costs, we have a challenge. For the past few years, we've been very effective in saving on costs, such as by sharing services with other councils, concentrating staff into fewer buildings, greatly improving the energy efficiency of our premises. investing in IT to enable procedures and systems to run far more efficiently. And at the same time, we've found ways to develop income, notably releasing underused bank balances, as we've just heard, and developing commercial services, such as the vehicle workshop at Waterbeach. In responding to the challenge, we will be carrying out further reviews of service budgets. We also have the officers bring together a long list of possible ways to reduce costs and develop new income streams. Now, those are being assessed for their viability and to ascertain whether they fit in with our overall objectives for serving Cambridge. While we need to find more ways to be less reliant on government funding, we also hope to benefit from the government's proposal for some form of business rates retention by local councils. Now, while this is primarily geared to retention of only the growth in business rates, it could still be an important source of funds into the future. And as you know, we're working to release land in the northeast of Cambridge for development of businesses, properties, and as well as housing. And that could lead to a strong growth in rates. So the development of a retention scheme is important to us. Through investment in the distant and more recent past, the Council has built up a sizable portfolio of commercial properties, and we have commissioned an external review of this portfolio. The review will consider all factors relating to the property, not least whether we need to diversify our property holdings more, given the pressures on some sectors, notably retail. Our investment in commercial property outside of our city has provided a better rate of return than has been possible from buying property in Cambridge. That's part of the reason we went to Haverhill. It's also enabled us to diversify away from a single area, and diversification is a very important part of any investment strategy. However, we also want to find ways to invest to help develop jobs and the overall economy of Cambridge, and the proposed investment in Alia's Future Business Centre is an extremely good example. We also want to develop some of the council's existing land holdings in the city, where they're suitable for new schemes, and help businesses develop here, as well as improving our income. The project to build 500 council homes will add significantly to the stock of genuinely affordable accommodation in Cambridge. However, in doing that construction, we're also building other housing alongside it. Now, several hundred additional homes will be constructed, notably on the Mill Road and Cromwell Road sites. Most of those additional units will be sold on the open market, but we're also planning for some of them to be bought by our housing company for letting at sub-market rents. So this medium-term financial strategy identifies the pressures we're facing in the years ahead. It will enable us to plan finding savings, to increase income streams, and to invest both for the future support of our budget and to help the economic development of Cambridge. The analysis will be used to help draw together the budget for 2019-20 and thereafter, and that budget will be published in January. By then, we cannot expect anything more than marginal change to the uncertainties we face, but this financial strategy report will help us maintain the core financial objectives of this council: sound and prudent financial management, the minimisation of the need for cuts to services, investment in more affordable housing, and a fairer and more equal city, a city we're proud to serve. Thank you.
Is there any debate? Councillor DL.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appears to be mine and Councillor Rod's chance to shine this evening. Again, I would like to thank officers for their efforts on this complex and obviously very important document. I'm pleased to note that current plans do seem to indicate that despite a very difficult economic conditions, the City Council does appear to remain reasonably financially robust and expects to maintain adequate reserves to continue providing essential services across our city. However, whereas in the last item I did support, I do have concerns regarding the level of transparency on the saving requirements, as noted on page 17 of this report, or page 166 of the full agenda. In particular, we've been struggling to get the detailed breakdown of the unavoidable revenue pressures, and therefore it's very difficult for us to assess the credibility of those extremely large assumptions. Without clarity on those figures, it's also therefore difficult for us or the city to judge the decisions that need to be made in budgeting and that can lead to very unpopular cuts to local services. Going forward, I just request greater transparency on such key budget drivers before we can support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Vick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to raise a very specific item, which is on page 172 of the meeting papers, which is page 23 of the document. This is the Jesus Green Public Conveniences refurbishment. First of all, I would like to welcome the overdue refurbishment of these public toilets. It's good that it's being tackled. But there are two aspects of this that I think are quite concerning, and that's the way in which the council has handled this. How normal, Mr. Mayor, is it to bring to this council like this an item to include something in its capital programme some 6 months after the work has been done and finished? No urgency decision, no consultation, nothing. And this is history. That seems to me not the appropriate way we should be dealing with capital items. If there's a point in having a capital programme, it's that it's a programme ahead of us, not a programme behind us. And the second aspect of this that I would like to refer to is the fact that in almost the self-same words, we proposed this item should be added to the capital programme in the budget meeting of this council in February. And at that time, the then executive councillor said that it wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary then, but actually it proved to be necessary quite soon afterwards. Now, I don't know whether that was disingenuousness because she didn't want to accept that she'd missed something out of her budget submission, or that she wasn't properly listening to her own officers who were talking to me enough about it, or that she hadn't been listening to what we had said in that debate. Our proposals had been subject to ample scrutiny before then. But I do think that this council deserves an apology, because this item you said was not necessary. It's now history, and you're insulting us by bringing it back and asking us to approve it after the event. This is not the way the council should work, and I think we have been mistreated and disrespected as members.
Councillor Smith.
Well, goodness, I never thought I'd be basically called a liar in a council meeting. So, but let me just remind council what was said and to be clear, because obviously it's important that everyone remembers things clearly. At the time, I said that the new budget allocation that was suggested in the amendment was not necessary because we already had plans from the overspend, from an underspend, to do the work that was needed, and that those plans have been in place from January onwards, and I've been very happy to have talked about them from the executive meeting in January onwards, had I been asked to do so. This is simply noting that money which was carried forward to ensure those works were done. I have to say that I think the tone of the debate this evening is entirely unnecessary. It's been carping, it's been negative, and it's been highly personal. And I think, quite frankly, we can all rise above that a little bit, but I hope that that clarification I've given has been clear. If it's not, I'm very happy to give more.
Councillor Robertson, do you wish to write a reply?
Yes, Councillor DL's point, he was asking about the detail of unavoidable revenue pressures on the council. The point about the medium-term financial strategy is to identify possible problems and to give us a heads up on where we've got, what the challenge is, and how let us have time to find our way to meeting that challenge. And as I said at the S&R committee, virtually the same thing, that when we have identified real problems and we have to develop solutions to them, then they will form part of the budget which will come up in the next cycle. The importance of this document is to enable us to not leave it to the last moment, to know in advance what our problems are and to give us the time to meet that challenge. So I have no problem about the issue not being available in detail at this stage. I would suggest that the whole document should now be put to the vote. Thank you.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendation? Those against? We now turn to agenda item 4.3 on pages 193 to 205. Recommendations of the Executive Councillor for Streets and Open Spaces for the Council appointment to the Conservators of the River Cam. The Labour Group appointments to the Conservators of the River Cam from January 2019 are Councillors Sargent and Massey. The Liberal Democrat Group appointment will be Councillor Tunnicliffe. I will ask Councillor Thornborough, as the Executive Councillor, to introduce the item if she wishes. Councillor Thornborough, do you wish to introduce?
Mr Mayor, as we approach the end of this three-year cycle, I'd just like to thank the current City Council representatives, Mr McNaughton, Mr Schofield, Ms Golliday and Mr Brown, and also Councillor Tunnicliffe, who has been in position for a while. We've got Councillor Hart and Councillor Sargent, who are newly on the committee, and the whole committee may do some extraordinary things up to the end of the year, but so I thank them all. I'd also like to thank councillors for their time and judgment in making the selection for the non-councillor roles from January 2019, Councillor Gillespie, Councillor McGurty and Councillor Smart. Thank you very much.
Is there any debate? Councillor McGurty.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. May I take the opportunity to welcome the new Executive Councillor Thornborough to her new role, and also to thank the previous Councillor Smith, for her contribution to the portfolio. I will try to keep my carping to the absolute minimum during this non-contentious item. Not a big fan of criticism this afternoon, or this evening, I understand, so let's try to be gentle with you on this occasion. I'd like to thank the panel for a really useful and engaging selection process. We had 12 fantastic applicants on this occasion, and it was a really difficult choice. We went backwards and forwards, and I think we came to some really good recommendations. So I'd like to thank the Executive Councillor for accepting the recommendations of the panel. I'm happy to see that the Conservatives will be a partially refreshed group by these appointments, and I'd like to congratulate the successful applicants. The River Cam is an especially important and famous feature of our city. It's a home, it's a natural environment, a social space, and a playground for residents and tourists alike. It's also an important commercial space, and I thank the Conservatives for their work.
Councillor Smart.
I'd just like to say a few words about the selection process for the Conservators. The selection panel consisted of Councillor Gillespie, Councillor McGurty and myself meeting a month ago on the 17th of September. Oscar, Colin and I certainly gave the nominations a thorough consideration that evening, and came to a collective decision that the people as stated in the report should be put forward. And those are May Block, Kate Hurst, Jim Ross and Sarah Dinn Salisbury. Further to that, I would like to nominate two councillors to join the Conservators, and these are Nicky Massey and Mike Sargent.
Councillor Thornborough, do you wish the right of reply? I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. We now turn to item 5A of the agenda, Statement of Gambling Principles, Licensing Committee on pages 207 to 348 of the agenda. Is there any debate? Councillor Peppers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cambridge City Council, as a licensing authority, is required to discharge its responsibilities under the Gambling Act of 2005. And for those of us who haven't been, or any of us who haven't been on the licensing committee, there are three objectives that we have to meet. We have to prevent gambling from being a source of crime and disorder, being associated with crime or disorder, or being used to support crime. Secondly, ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair and open way. And thirdly, protecting children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling. The gambling statement of principles contains the minimum of amendments, no changes to the intent or direction of the policy. And the important thing is the wording that the Council will, as per the SA 181, take into the account the size of the premises, the number of counter positions available for person-to-person transactions, and the ability to staff to monitor the use of self-service betting terminals by children and young persons, or by vulnerable people when considering the number of nature, circumstances of self-service betting terminals an operator wants to offer. When we met, the committee voted this unanimously, and I urge every one of you to please support this. Thank you.
Councillor Bird, do you wish the right of reply?
Thank you, Mayor. No, just to say that I just urge the whole committee to actually vote for this, please.
I will now go to the vote then. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. We now turn to item 5B of the agenda, Independent Remuneration Panel, Civic Affairs Committee, on pages 349 to 355 of the agenda, and the adoption minute is on page 7 of the information pack. Is there any debate? Councillor Massey.
Yes, I do need to declare an interest in this item, so I won't be able to vote.
Councillor Robertson.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to clarify the amendment that we put forward in the adoption papers. We thank the panel for their work in assessing the special responsibilities of some of the councillors, but we felt that they hadn't understood the extent to which the work of the Combined Authority and our council representative on the board of the Combined Authority. The Combined Authority is responsible for wide-scale strategic developments across the county and Peterborough with a huge budget, and it's recently taken on the role of supervising the work that the local LEP used to do, the LEP. And we felt that clearly the experience of our representative on the Combined Authority board was that a full allowance should be appropriate rather than a 50% allowance. And that's why we put forward this proposed amendment. And I hope it's accepted. Thank you.
Councillor Benstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to reiterate the point that Councillor Robertson has made about the amount of work which is now being carried out by councillors from the chamber here away from the Guildhall and away from the city, and how that amount of work that we councillors are now expected to carry out is over and above the amount of work that was first in place when many of us were first elected. Not just me, but some of the more recent councillors who've been elected as well. What I would ask the council at the next time when we go to the independent panel to look at remuneration again, is in light of that, the amount of work that's being done by certain councillors away from the council puts more pressure on those councillors who do their work within the wards and within the city. Our allowances for backbench councillors, the basic allowance, is one of the lowest, not just in the county, but in the country. And if we still want to be attracting, in future, good quality councillors, we need to make sure that they are rewarded for the time that they are giving up, not for the work they're doing, but for the time they are giving up to do the work that we expect them to do it for this city and for this authority. It won't affect me because I'll be long gone. But I do think that when we're talking about multipliers based on the basic rate, it draws into focus how low that basic rate is for backbench councillors that are affected by the knock-on effect of the work that is done by other councillors away from this chamber and away from this council.
Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It felt, unfortunately, a little easy for this amendment to go to Civic Affairs, doubling the allowance for one post on the CA board. And there was very little evidence presented at the time, and very little presented now. The announcement was only, the amendment, sorry, was only announced halfway through the item. Now, I don't disagree with many of the comments that were made opposite, by members opposite just now. There is a lot of work involved with the combined authority, but that could apply to a lot of the posts involved. It feels largely pointless to ask the independent panel to look into allowances if the results are not taken back with as much seriousness as they could have been when it comes to the actual scrutiny meeting. I'm absolutely not adverse to councillors being given fair remuneration for their work, because without that we will not get truly diverse representation. But I do feel it would be appropriate if more evidence was put in front of us when we considered these things, so that we're actually able to come to a proper conclusion ourselves, rather than just have it presented as that this is something we're going to do. I'm hoping that if it is available, perhaps in his closing remarks, the Executive Council could take the time to explain a little more about the evidence upon which the proposal is based on, and why this couldn't be put in front of the committee before it met, the Affairs Committee before it met. Thank you.
Councillor Beck.
Chair, more of a procedural question. What is the guidance on declaration of interests on this item? It would be beneficial if we all had that.
You don't actually need to declare an interest and to be able to vote on this item. Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I went along to the remuneration panel. They interviewed me as somebody who was actually on the Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But I did make the wider point that the leader of the council, or our representative on the Combined Authority, like most of the members of the Combined Authority board, is actually putting more time into the Combined Authority board than they are into their own council. No, sorry, that many of the members of the board have actually said that in public. And I think it's something that we have to address going forward, because if we are going to be increasingly involved in these outside bodies, we've got to make sure there is allowance for people who serve on those bodies. Otherwise, the number of councillors who can actually afford to spend more than a day away some weeks from Cambridge and not working is going to be very few, and we're going to be making sure the only people who can serve on these committees, on these boards, are people who've got their own financial income outside of employment, or people who are retired. And I think there's an ongoing issue that we need to look at and discuss with the remuneration panel. I made this very strongly, and I got the strong impression from them that they felt their hands were tied in what they could do. So when they came forward with only 50% of an SRA for the leader on the combined authority, I felt they did that on the basis they felt their hands were tied. And I think it may be that we need to have discussions with government about how we are remunerating councillors on their increasing workload, because at the moment it's not sufficient for the amount of work we're asking people to do and to represent this city.
Councillor O'Reilly.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to very briefly reiterate or reflect what Councillor Sargent's just said, in that the commitment to serve this council, including on outside bodies, can be quite astonishingly time-consuming, and it's time when you cannot earn money. When I was serving as an executive councillor, I was only able to work part-time, and so every hour that I gave to this council was an hour when I could not earn money. I could not earn enough money not to get into debt during that period of time. So if we want to get good quality councillors who are prepared to serve beyond the simple backbench duties, then we need to be able to allow them to take home a fair amount of money for that.
Councillor Dryden.
Very briefly, I think this is all down to us as councillors' fault. This has happened for over many, many years since I've been to council. Most of the time when the independent panel recommends an increase, we don't accept it. So this is all our own fault.
Councillor Gillespie.
No, it's working now. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to support the sentiments that the amount of councillors do, not just with council business, but speaking to residents and going to meetings that they're invited to. It takes up a lot of time, and working part-time can be difficult as well. A lot of employers want someone in the office 5 days a week. In software, pharma, stuff like that, they want you all the time or not at all. So it is often a choice to be a councillor full-time in a sense, and to support councillors to do the work. Well, I'm up for reimbursing the work like the GCP that does need to be done, and does need to be done properly to compete with the authorities in a way who are paying their representatives quite a lot more.
Councillor Bajan.
Thank you, Mayor. I also went to the remuneration panel and made an argument that suggested that the council leader, their role on the combined authority is so important for this city. I served on the scrutiny committee for a year, and looking in from outside, it was very clear that the amount of work that the city council leader actually has to do is colossal. Now, I think that the current incumbent underestimates what he actually does, because he defends this city in a completely hostile environment, an environment where there are no other Labour or no other, let's say, no other Labour representatives. And he is piling in there and defending this city, now supported to a certain extent by the Lib Dems, but he is defending this city alone. And the amount of work that he actually has to do that is colossal. And so, whilst I won't vote on this, because part of it does provide me with a small amount of money, the reason I won't be voting is that, but I think that it needs really to be supported and there should be no criticism. I think it's not enough money still.
Councillor McPherson, do you wish the right of reply?
Well, only to say that obviously I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and Councillor Evasion has just stolen my thunder. So I'm just lining all through that. So, of course, I support the this 100% remuneration for all the reasons that Councillor Evasion has just said. But, however, also take on board Councillor O'Connor's comments about the time factor and actually coming late to committee, not having proper time to consider it. I'll take that on board, and I think you're quite right to say that, and ensure that doesn't happen again. But I'll be voting for this, of course.
I'll now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendations? And those against? Item 5C. We now turn to item 5C of the agenda, process for the scrutiny of the Council's budget. Civic Affairs Committee on pages 357 to 371 of the agenda, and the adoption minutes are on pages 9 to 17 of the information pack. Is there any debate? Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're at 5C, yes? Mr. Mayor, I'd like first to acknowledge that the Civic Affairs Committee did kindly agree to a change of the dates involved in the way that this new approach that they want to support for budget scrutiny would actually work. So if passed, these recommendations would not reduce the time available for opposition budget amendments to be prepared, and we're grateful for that. But I did indicate to the committee when I went along there that this doesn't mean that we accept the overall proposal on the table here, which affects much more than that issue in a way that I want to underline. What I think is being proposed here is quite serious. It's more than halving the opportunity for the Council's budget to be scrutinised. It means that whatever else scrutiny committees do to scrutinise the portfolio of services within their responsibility, apart from some aspects of housing, they will have no opportunity to scrutinise the finances for those services alongside their policy decisions. This breaks any line of sight to financial effectiveness, proportional and priority allocation of funds, and the value for money. Under these proposals, there will in fact be only one occasion for public scrutiny of the general fund budget by one small 6-member committee with other items on its agenda, not to do with the budget, before it gets then voted on as a whole by the full council. Before these changes, there would have been 5 opportunities by 4 different committees according to their different responsibilities. Now, with money tight and financial judgment critical, this is a terrible false economy. Amongst the many threads in the public debate about financial failure of whole councils like Northamptonshire is the importance of good scrutiny. The proposal here is moving this council in totally the wrong direction. As things get tough, you need more, not less scrutiny. Members opposite obviously have the votes to approve this change today. Administration sometimes treats scrutiny of their plans as a luxury or superfluous. With some honourable exceptions, scrutiny is typically led by opposition members. It's what we do as part of supplying a challenge and securing accountability in a pluralist system. It's sometimes inconvenient and frustrating for an administration to submit to, but it is in the greater good. Under our administration of the Council, this opportunity was provided to members opposite in their role as an opposition and as lead scrutineers at that time, and you would have expected nothing else. It's this that you're now, I think, emasculating. It's not a compensation to have a show-and-tell presentation about the administration's budget in private, behind closed doors. This could be set up without resort to changing the Constitution, as we're being asked to do today, and there may be a demand for it and there may not be. The issue here is what you are proposing to close down. Scrutiny needs to be carried out under the public eye. One of the tools of an opposition, which can obviously be outvoted at any time numerically, is their ability to draw out facts into the public domain and discuss them there to enable public opinion. And I feel sure that members opposite have not missed this perspective, as they held it themselves while utilising the opportunity to scrutinise our administration's budgets. And it seems to us today that it is precisely because they do understand the potential of scrutiny that they are happy to so radically limit it. So, Mr. Mayor, we will be voting against this recommendation. It's a step in the wrong direction in our opinion, and it's a very short-sighted step in the interests of local public finances.
Councillor Robertson.
There will still be the opportunity for scrutiny at the Strategy and Resources Committee, which will be followed by an executive meeting to discuss the whole issue. The opposition representatives for each of these portfolios will obviously be wish to turn up and make their scrutiny observations at that point. And I would suggest that is the answer to the problem you're suggesting. The other part of this proposal is to reduce the number of strategy and resources meetings, which were by reducing one by cancelling it altogether, and combining the exec meeting with the SNR that will be held. And that clearly is a more efficient way of running the business. So I think we have addressed your concerns.
Councillor Herbert.
Well, I'm a total believer in scrutiny, and I think that it's scrutiny both by members of the majority group, but also challenge and scrutiny by the opposition that makes sure that pre-scrutiny works to best effect. What Councillor Bick seeks to describe is major debates in the other committees, which we've now got environment and community, housing, scrutiny in relation to general fund, and we've got the other committee being strategy and resources, as well as planning and transport. I mean, I've been a member for years of those committees before I took this role on, and essentially I cannot remember, and perhaps Councillor Bick can after this meeting remind me of when one of those committees has actually come up with a major change. The reception of the budget and all of the work that officers have to put into what's a lot of work doesn't actually generate any great change or challenge. Councillor Bick wrongly said that there's only now going to be one opportunity in public to scrutinise or to challenge, and that happens both at the Strategy and Resources Committee and at the Executive, and it happens in this council chamber. So there are three. And at each there are opportunities to press for changes. So I want to make it our business to ensure that the budget is presented in a way, and I've asked officers this, to ensure that there is clarity within the budget and how it's presented, so that members of the committees can actually see what the changes are in their budget. I also remind Councillor Bick that the budget actually just focuses in a way on the top of the iceberg, or on part, it's not an iceberg, but on the top 5 or 10%. Certainly under our administration, I can't speak for yourselves, but if you're only focusing also on the changes, I don't think many committees do proper financial scrutiny, and perhaps that would be one route that they could actually make a difference, is to actually just look at the whole of their budget, because as Councillor Bick knows, the main focus in the budget debates, Mayor, is on changes, not on a lot of the quantum. So there is no diminution, and there is the opportunity, which I hope councillors take, of actually getting into a greater understanding of the budget, because there will be both briefings early on and then these three opportunities. We had, and I've got 30 seconds, I presume, we had imposed on us this extra Strategy and Resources Committee. To have a Strategy and Resources Committee which is essentially only to look at the amendments from the opposition is frankly a superfluous waste of time when it can all be done in a single meeting, Mayor.
Councillor Benstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I will do now after hearing Councillor Bick, because I was at the meeting at Civic Affairs, as were you. Civic Affairs, in my time being a Civic Affairs member, has never been a terribly political committee. A lot of work is done in Civic Affairs through consensus, and we discuss things through, and we rarely argue, but we do have sometimes some quite decent debates there on different issues. And I notice from memory and from the minutes that the Liberal Democrat amendment that was put forward by Councillor O'Connell, but brought to committee by Councillor Bick, was passed unanimously, as was this motion at Civic Affairs. So if I was a real old cynic, Mr. Mayor, and I didn't know Councillor Bick as well as I did, I would say he was possibly grandstanding.
Councillor Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've all heard this evening how other authorities undertake their scrutiny or lack of scrutiny, as we've heard in the previous item. That lack of transparency leads only one way. It leads to complacency, it leads to an administration that is lazy, and it leads to administration ultimately that fails. And I hope, Mr. Mayor, that this is not the thin end of the wedge, because we see elsewhere how that approach is not the approach that the people of Cambridge want. More than anywhere, the people of Cambridge want us to be able to engage on an evidence basis and robustly test each other's proposals and assumptions, particularly in the budget process. And so therefore, it is important that the opposition, regardless of its colour, is able to undertake that task. And the residents of the city expect it. And I just want to make the point that the leader references, when did a scrutiny committee come up with a proposal that was adopted? What about environment scrutiny and shop mobility? That was an item that was proposed by us as part of the budget process. Now, you may have not accepted it in that particular committee, but at least you did a half U-turn later on. And that in itself is an illustration of the importance of that level of scrutiny. And I only hope that we're not going down a route that we see in other authorities, because that would be sad for the authority here, and it would be sad for the people of Cambridge.
Councillor Smart.
Mayor, so I, like Councillor Benstead, wasn't going to say anything, but since Councillor Bick has said what he said, I'll just say something. So I think he's just confused between the idea of quantity and quality. So you can obviously have several meetings and have the chance to ask the same question, but what really needs to happen in scrutiny is you only need one meeting, one chance to say something that needs to be the right thing to say at that time. So I think there's just this confusion between, if you have lots and lots and lots of meetings in a council, you'll get better scrutiny. No, that isn't the case. And they've proved that by failing themselves over the years when they were in charge. What they need to do is to ask the right question at the right time. That's what needs to happen.
Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the comments that were made just now, we recognise that in Civic Affairs and in the Council, the ruling group do have the votes to push through these things because you are the ruling group. It would have been a little bit silly for us in Civic Affairs to try and kick up a fuss and not put through an amendment such as the one we did, knowing that it was going to be defeated anyway. We tried to achieve what we thought was best for the Council. That doesn't mean, though, that we do not, we should not express our concerns when it comes to adopting it here, and to put those on record. I don't think that's grandstanding at all. I think that's just the normal course of council business. And also, although the adoption of the amendment was unanimous, for which I'm grateful, as I recall, there was no vote on the final item. It kind of went through on a nod. So to say it was unanimous is not quite correct, and I believe the adoption note has now been corrected or updated to reflect that.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I've just called up the minutes of this particular meeting so that I'm not quoting this wrongly, but thinking back to the meeting of the executive that took place in January, and we all turned up, and we were all expecting questions, and I'm looking at the minutes, and I see it's absolutely the case that questions were asked of only 2 executive councillors in that meeting. The rest of us sat there, no questions were asked. That was an opportunity for scrutiny that was not taken up. Now, I was tempted to say, I might regret saying this because it might be seen as a challenge, but actually, no, because you're absolutely right. This is part of the process, but take those opportunities up.
Councillor Goering.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to sort of underline a little bit that I think this is the wrong direction of travel. We see in the combined authority how creeping sort of authoritarian kind of tendencies are, shying away from scrutiny, sort of the scrutiny committee being ridiculed by the elected mayor of that combined authority. And I just think we have an opportunity in this council to set a counterpoint, right? The reason why the leader has to spend so much time on the combined authority as you just voted in the previous item is precisely that. It's lack of transparency at the very fundamental level. And to a certain extent, I think the leader himself and the benches opposite are a little bit to blame for the institutional setup that allowed for that lack of transparency. But we have an opportunity here not to go down a similar route, because I think sort of then saying, oh, there were no questions asked, therefore scrutiny is not necessary, is actually not the right way. That's exactly what the mayor of the combined authority would say. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I've lost the plot somewhere here. We've just been debating about scrutiny, and Councillor O'Connell's just pointed out she was sat on the committee where they were scrutinising this report, but she can't remember how it got through. It went through on a nod. Now, they want more scrutiny. They've sat on a committee. It was voted unanimous, which unanimous means everybody, but she can't remember if it went through unanimously or if it was a nod by somebody. So I fail to see now what's going on, because they've had scrutiny, but they don't seem to know what scrutiny is.
Councillor Deal.
I do have some emails in front of me. I just wondered if, well, to be honest, it was changed in the minutes. Effectively, it was, I think, agreed that there hadn't been a vote on the final item. I don't know if Gary would confirm, but there is just a point of information, or if that's the correct term. It wasn't voted through unanimously. At the same time, I would hope we can keep civic affairs to be a friendly and supportive.
Councillor McPherson, do you wish to write a reply?
Mr. Mayor, if we could have confirmation from the officers of what happened, someone neutral.
We're not in a position to confirm this because we don't have notes of the meeting with us. So
we can follow up afterwards and check the notes of the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, is it possible that could happen during the interval?
So, well, there was a committee manager at the meeting as well as I. I wasn't taking the full notes of the meeting. I will do what I can, but the committee manager isn't here, so I don't know where their notes are. And we produced an adoption minute. The committee happened last Wednesday.
Councillor Moore.
I'd just like to raise the point that I think the officers might need a break as well. And I don't know that I think it's right to know what happened, but I don't see that that's... I think there's a debate in here. It's not actually going to change the substantive debate on this point as to whether a vote was taken then, will it? I think the officers also need a break. That was all I was going to say.
That's as maybe, but I will now go to the vote. Please can I see those in favour of the recommendations?
25.
Those against?
That's 13.
I think it's about time we had a comfort break, and it's now 8:15, so we're back here at 25:02.
Wear this uniform and work alongside them. I've learnt so much, and it's not an easy job. We can do better, and being informed about litter and responding is vital. So I'd like to thank resident Colin, who tweeted on the 29th of September at 8:32 a.m. about glass on the Barnwell Road crossing, and also at 12:10 p.m. that it had been cleared away on the same day. I'd also like to thank resident Marcus, who tweeted on the 13th of October at 12:27 that the toilets on Lama's land needed cleaning. I know that this has been looked into. Now, if Councillor Martinelli, Bick or Gillespie are walking around our beautiful city centre and their ward, I would very much hope that they too would inform the council about any litter problems rather than wait until coming to this council meeting. If found, and let us know, that some food outlets were using blue plastic refuse bags for food waste, I would be able to inform them about the increase in enforcement officers from 3 to 6 and 2 more being recruited, and our anti-litter campaign coming very soon about using signage, new media and other communication channels, our grot spot cleaning and our programme for water pressures cleans. This is my second council meeting as a councillor, and in my experience, the Lib Dems have a 100% record of questions about street cleaning and public toilets. So I would like to offer Councillor McGurty the opportunity to join me at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. one morning to work alongside the street cleaning team to find out more. And he would then be able to have his own uniform too.
The supplementary.
Thank you, Executive Councillor. I congratulate you for your regular outings at such an early hour of the day. I'd be absolutely honoured to meet you on any of those many occasions that you join the street cleaning team. Pop one in my diary, please. Or several. She seemed to be so... So, at the last session of this council, we did offer quite a helpful amendment, which would have allocated some of the unspent budget in the street cleaning direct budget line for an additional deep clean of city centre streets. Now, naturally, the amendment was rejected by the Labour administration, who assured us that the requested level of cleaning is already being undertaken. But the briefest glance of what you have just referred to yourself as city centre grot spots shows that we could do and should do a great deal more. Since then, the council has been contacted by a business owner on Regent Street, and I think it's important to ask the Executive Councillor about the serious ongoing public health issue there. The business in question is a traditional shop, but it's surrounded by restaurants. And being busy at night, they place their rubbish on the street overnight for collection early in the morning, which we can very much look forward to collecting together. But the food waste in those refuse sacks does tend to leak out, and rotting fatty mess gets trodden into the pavement on Regent Street. The issue was reported to the Executive Councillor of Streets and Open Spaces and at the beginning of September. Would the Executive Councillor like to elaborate on why this has now been described to the resident as an ongoing issue over a month later? Because the users of Regent Street are faced with an unpleasant mess, and dare I suggest once again that the additional deep clean might have been a good idea after all, Mr. Mayor.
I've spoken to the shop owner several times, and they're very satisfied with our response, and I've informed them about the enforcement team's awareness of the problems around the shops and what's going on. But also, there is a question that I could have, if I'd specifically been asked about the blue bin, the plastic bins used for food, I could have actually provided more information as an architect for the councillors for that area, because there is an issue about the number of food outlets who have got planning permission for change of use, where they do not have to show that they've got adequate refuge storage, and that's one reason why they put food in the blue bin liners and put them out on the streets. So that's something that needs to be looked at, and a planning issue, as well as also being aware of the problem locally. Thank you.
Councillor Massey.
Question number 2, please.
Mr. Mayor, on the face of it, it's a welcome development. Scrapping the cap is something that we, on this side of the chamber, have been calling for, and it's pleasing that the Prime Minister has finally grasped the urgent need to build more council homes for rent. However, the devil will be in the detail. It's over 2 weeks since the Prime Minister announced this, and only today did Chief Executives receive a letter from James Brokenshire, the Housing Secretary, on this subject. It appears that this was a last-minute addition to Theresa May's speech and caught civil servants on the hop. What we now know is that governments are to consult with councils on a draft determination that would revoke previous determinations from government, which place limits on how much we could borrow against our housing stock. Nevertheless, we need more detail about how this will work, and it's likely that this information will emerge in the budget on the 29th of October, with the determination due to come into effect the day after. James Brokenshire says that, and I quote, "Their aim is to remove the borrowing cap as soon as possible." We need to hold them to that promise, as we need these powers now. We have to get on with the urgent job of tackling the housing crisis. It cannot wait, and those on the housing needs register cannot wait. In addition, we will continue to press the government on other measures that are also required, particularly the increased flexibility on how we can use right-to-buy receipts to allow us to engage in innovative solutions like the recent purchase of land at Cromwell Road, partly using right-to-buy receipts. We will also continue to press for a review of the broad housing market area so that the pressing needs of renters in Cambridge are addressed with an uplift in benefit rates to allow them to afford rent in to allow them to afford to rent in at least some parts of the city.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Tatala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question number 3, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm very proud to be part of a council which is involved in a scheme like this. And I wanted to start by paying tribute to my predecessor, Councillor Johnson, for his leadership in this area. As someone with 18 years' experience as a teacher and school leader, I know that for many families, the holidays are especially difficult. During term time, there are free school meals for young people who need them. But of course, these disappear in the holidays. So this scheme is much needed in supplementing the family food budget. But it's much more than that. The scheme's open to everyone. It's not means tested. There's no stigma in attending. And the sessions also offer activities for young people and community for parents. There are 5 venues in the city that offer holiday lunches. There's Buchan Street Neighbourhood Centre, Ross Street Community Centre, Brownsfield, Meadows, the Meadows, and the Church of the Good Shepherd also run a holiday lunch scheme as well. And I think the numbers of lunches provided so far in 2018 are really impressive. At Easter, 248 lunches were provided. In May, half term, 198, and in the summer, and I think this is the key number, 1,314 lunches. And I just want to say thank you to all the staff and volunteers who have helped to make this happen, because I think it's a really fantastic scheme.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Tyler?
Thank you, Executive Councillor. Could you give us an update on what are the future plans? Thank you.
Okay, so over October half term, we're piloting lunches in a new venue in Queen Edith and at Trumpington Pavilion, and we're doing the latter in partnership with Cambridge Sustainable Food, which I'm particularly excited about. We're looking to work in Abbey Ward, developing a lunch offer later in the year there. We're also looking into running Christmas meals for families. That's going to be run at Buchan Street, and helping community groups to run an event between Christmas and the New Year. And for the first time, we are planning to run holiday lunches between Christmas and New Year at Brownsfield Community Centre as well.
Councillor Cantrell.
Question 4, Mr Mayor.
As the question refers to the winter months, let me set out what the Council will be doing during this period. From November, when the Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, that SWEP, the period starts, until March 2019 when it ends, up to 46 additional beds will be provided when the weather turns bad. SWEP beds are not provided continuously over the SWEP period, but are opened and closed by the Council in response to conditions. Generally, authorities will call SWEP when the forecast is of 3 or more consecutive nights of sub-zero temperatures. However, Cambridge City Council has always adopted a more common sense approach than this, also calling SWEP when the weather has been wet for long periods or when there has been a long period when it is cold but not freezing. We gather intelligence to help us make decisions principally from the street outreach team and Jimmy's, which administers SWEP on our behalf, and we will often call SWEP because these frontline services advise we should. SWEP is open to all comers, including people without a local connection and all with no recourse to public funds. All that is required is an acceptable level of behaviour. SWEP is used whenever possible as a way of engaging with people who do not use our services in other circumstances. In relation to this, much of what we see on the streets has a primary cause in issues other than homelessness. Our last quarterly count of rough sleepers, carried out on the 14th of September, 60% of people counted had a known substance abuse problem. 4 of those counted sleeping rough had accommodation. During SWEP last year, there was only 1 night when use of beds reached capacity. In some of the coldest weather, there were empty beds. For those resistant to taking up what we presently offer, if I may finish, some of the most visible people on our streets, we are working on an expanded form of housing first piloted in Cambridge several years ago. An officer has been appointed to bring our complements of such accommodation up from its current 2 to a target of 10. We are also looking at other housing first models.
Do you have supplementary, Councillor Cantrell?
I do, Mr Mayor. I thank the Executive Councillor. As we've seen from the written question, 5 homeless people died in this city in the last 12 months. 5. That's 5 too many. That's 5 too many. And as we can see from the SWEP statistics, over 70 individuals were helped during the provision of the service, again from the written question. And that figure and those facts, Mr Mayor, suggest that the homeless crisis is still very present in this city as we move towards the winter period. And so can I ask whether the Executive Councillor will give an undertaking to this chamber this evening that the City Council will take steps to offer housing every night of the winter period, not just during the sweat protocol and not just on a generous basis, but every night during the winter period for those homeless people in the city. No one person should be sleeping rough during the winter period in this city, Mr. Mayor.
Well, as my answer stated, my previous answer stated to Councillor Cantrell, the SWEP protocol which is in place actually deals sufficiently with the demand which exists during cold weather periods and periods where the weather is bad. So, but I can't really make a decision tonight about whether or not we're going to open up additional capacity for everyone who's on the streets. But what I can say is that we are working very hard with authorities, charity groups and other stakeholders in working with homeless people, and particularly those who are hard to reach, because we just won £70,000 for this financial year from the government to assist with our work. This funding for this financial year will allow police and agencies to be out on the streets from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m, issuing advice and assistance to those who are sleeping rough and begging. It will engage anyone who is in immediate need of accommodation to be directed to a place where a safe bed can be, will be waiting for them, and also provides rough sleepers assisted by the programme of a specifically funded member of staff from Jimmy's to find a more permanent housing solution. So that, combined with what we already offer, actually provides a good solution to the problems of homelessness in the city, I think, combined with our other initiatives of spending on £700,000 a year on homelessness prevention grants and the like.
Councillor Barnett.
Question 5, please.
Thanks very much for your question, because this is a really, really fantastic project. Activate is aimed at supporting children and young people to build essential skills and confidence as they transition into secondary education, and it's now in its 3rd year of delivery. So up to this point, the young people taking part are pupils at one secondary school at Coleridge Community College, working with project partners including Cambridge Junction, I forgot to put my timer on, Kettle's Yard, the University of Cambridge Museums, the new International Theatre, the Museum of Cambridge and Menagerie Theatre. And it's particularly targeted at those young people who have not taken place in creative activities in the past, and the idea is really to get them to create their own sense of what they're interested in, rather than just say, we think you should do this, which I think is particularly exciting. So some sessions are on school premises, some are at the partner venues. The focus is on the development of skills in creativity and communication, building confidence, building resilience, and also to give them just a wider sense of all the exciting things that are going on in the city. They get the opportunity to perform and present their work, and also to gain the Arts Award qualification. 56 young people have taken part in the programme so far, and of course a lot of people have also watched their performances. The school is actually now is going to make a financial contribution to its delivery. So happy are they with the work that's been going on in terms of the impact on those young people. And we're now looking at how we can roll that further out to more schools across the city from year 4. I'd like in my final 30 seconds just to give a couple of quotes from students. They've given their permission for this to be used. I never ask questions because I'm shy. Activate has helped me. In class I can ask questions, like if I need help or something. It's really helpful because I've become more confident when I'm speaking, asking questions in front of the class. I've learnt teamwork, how to make new friends. I've learnt where the museums are. I didn't go to museums before, and it's been fun to go to them. And I think thanks to Lucy, Ryan and Rachel for sharing and allowing us to celebrate their success this evening.
Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Peppers.
Question number 6, please.
We have a programme that checks and renews smoke detectors. Detectors are checked annually as part of gas servicing, and when properties are vacant, and all detectors are replaced on a programmed basis every 10 years. Last year, we had to report that our contractor had fallen behind on this work, but the programme is now up to date. We do have some problems where detectors are due to be replaced and tenants have not allowed us access to do so. We will continue to contact them to try and persuade them of the importance of this. Where our properties have fire alarm systems, these are checked and serviced every quarter. We are also carrying out ongoing information campaigns to remind our tenants and leaseholders of the importance of their role in fire safety, and that includes them reporting to us any concerns they may have about their detectors.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please.
Councillor Peppers.
Yes. Thank you so much for taking fire precautions very seriously. And I understand as part of the fire safety, everything in communal and common areas have to be removed, including doormats, signs and pot plants, regardless of whether the space was internal or even outside spaces, including gardens. Has the leading group gone a little bit overzealous, penalizing the residents who look after their homes, such as the Lichfield residents? Will this move not send the message that council tenants are treated as second-class citizens and they cannot be proud of their homes because the properties belong to the council?
I'm afraid I disagree with what Councillor Pivas has been saying, and I think also some of the, several of the Liberal Democrats who made a similar arguments at Housing Scrutiny Committee. He's referring to the zero tolerance policy in communal areas, which was passed. I know that there is a lot of dismay and concern, but I just want to read some text for you. Common areas, including hallways, shared balconies, landings and window ledges, must be kept completely clear to enable a safe emergency evacuation and to reduce the spread of fire. We will remove any objects found outside individual flats immediately. You may be charged the cost of the removal or storage of the item. All pushchairs, bicycles, mobility scooters and doormats must be stored either in your property or in other areas provided, and not in communal areas. Now, that's very similar to our policy. I read something which is from the Eastbourne Borough Council, which is run by the Liberal Democrats. So I have the Liberal Democrats here complaining that actually Labour is implementing a policy which their colleagues in Eastbourne are very happy to provide to the tenants there. So I would say that what we're doing is actually putting tenants first and ensuring that the safety is because their safety is paramount.
Councillor Bird.
Question 7.
Thank you for your question. It is truly disappointing that the Post Office is coming forward with this proposal. It arises partly because at the time that the current leader, but not for, I understand, very long, the Liberal Democrat Party, was in charge of Royal Mail privatisation, a deal was struck to separate out off Crown Post Offices, and also a further deal was struck to give W.H. Smiths a big interest in the post office industry. Clearly, the post office at the moment is run by professional postal workers who've been trained. It's in a very accessible location on the street. It can be found by and accessed by people who are disabled, older people, found by tourists who need stamps, found by people who need help with passports or with nationality forms, and that will not be the case. So I'll be very happy to do as you ask and write that letter, and I'll seek the support of other councillors before I do that. But it is a campaign that we should argue back on. It's not even clear that the Post Office is actually going to listen, but I think they do need to, and we do need to get people behind the campaign to keep the Post Office where it is, because it works.
Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. Yes, it's very important that we try and fight this one. There's many post offices around the city that are not accessible. They have 3 or 4 steps going up. So a lot of elderly and disabled do use that main post office. As we all know, when we walk past, it's absolutely full. You have to queue sometimes outside the door. W.H. Smith's shop is not a very good shop. There's too many counters and stuff like that, and I think there's going to be a big problem with access when we try and use that as well. So I would urge everyone to get onto this campaign and let's fight and move in St Andrews, because they've already moved it once from across the road. So let's keep it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, they spent a lot of money converting that to be a post office, and as has been said, it is used by people who can't get access to other post offices because the access in some of the sub-post offices is inadequate. So we do need to win this argument also, because people who are disabled and need to get in and out of post offices need that facility. And WH Smith's is not even accessible from 10 till 4 because it's nowhere near disabled vehicle access.
Councillor O'Connell.
Question 8, please, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So you're talking about, you say, the sudden removal of mixed recycling bins. So one actually hasn't been removed yet. Basically, there are 2 recycling points, one at Waitrose, which is Hawkston Road, and one at Tesco's, which is Newmarket Road. Most of the recycling bins there are for complementary materials to things that can't be taken from normal residential recycling, so things like batteries, light bulbs, books, clothes. And at both sites we've also had blue bins, so anyone with any extra recycling could put them there. So unfortunately there's been quite a lot of fly tipping. So both of those are sites owned by the supermarkets, so they're not council sites. So we have been asked, so although they're at slightly different stages, basically the same thing has happened. The supermarkets asked us to remove them because they've had a lot of complaints from their customers. So we haven't consulted with the public, but we have consulted with the owners of the land who have asked us to remove them, because obviously it's important to maintain those sites for other things, because in fact we want to extend them. Not extend the area, but extend what we can accept there. So to publicise, we have put posters up. For the one at Hawkston, it was over a month, and the one at Newmarket Road, well, the posters are up, and it's yet to be closed, but it will be at the end of the month.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for that answer. Several residents contacted me about this because they did find the move of the Hawkston Road site very sudden. That was one resident's word in an email to me. They were very confused by the proposed changes. For instance, the poster on the site in Hawkston Road, at least, led to a recorded message with no possibility of actually talking to a human. It proposed that residents take their waste to a site elsewhere that was smaller and already had a worse fly tipping problem. And people were very confused as to how this could possibly work, because if people are fly tipping there, they're just going to carry on fly tipping. Asking people who are already following the rules to stop fly tipping, to stop putting things in the bins, is not going to have any effect on the fly tipping. Officers were asked to delay this, we come to a better solution. I have to say that despite several emails to officers, this is the first I'm hearing this request by Waitrose, and it just highlights the fact that really there should have been more communication about this with both ward councillors and residents' associations. Can the Executive Councillor commit to consulting with ward councillors, or at least informing us in advance, and appropriate residents' associations if this sort of change is going to happen in future?
Thank you. So I can't commit to consulting, because if we've got something on somebody else's land and they say you need to move it, we can't, there's no consultation to be had. However, I can say that I will feed back that we ought to inform ward councillors. We did change the posters to make them more informative, and the good news is we're introducing quite a number of ways for residents who have excess recycling. So as has been for the past few years, you can always get a second or even third blue bin just for free. You can do that online or by calling. And then from this October, as in now, if you occasionally have a bit more recycling, you can either put cardboard tied up next to your blue bin, or in a clear plastic sack, you can put other mixed recycling out, and it will be taken with your blue bin. And as I said, as part of the review we're doing of these recycling sites, we are hoping to introduce more things that we can accept, for example, perhaps small electrical items. And we're also, luckily, in the south of the city, your ward, introducing in the new developments more recycling sites. So there will be more to report shortly. And I'm really pleased to say the most important thing is the one where it's been taken away already it's worked really well. Obviously, I can't guarantee that there'll never be any more fly tipping, but it's much clearer, and there's been no fly tipping since.
Councillor O'Reilly.
Question 9, please, Mr. Mayor.
Seem to be spending all evening paying tribute to Councillor Johnson and his fantastic work on this portfolio, so thank you again. I also want to pay tribute to Steph Berwitz in the CHIPS team, who leads as Children's Engagement Officer and has been working on these projects. Projects have included takeover days at Shirley School in East Chesterton, takeover days in King's Hedges, and those takeover days are where we work with young people to talk about particular issues in their area, what they would like CHIPS to deliver next, and to look at issues such as travel provision. It's made changes to the half-term programme to be launched in January, sorry, the term time programme to be launched in January. We've got young people organising litter picking sessions. It's really hands-on. We've been doing consultation on the Abbey BMX tracks, ensuring that the young people who use those tracks are fully consulted as changes are made, and we're working with the Streets and Open Spaces team to look at next steps for that. They've also worked with the Greater Cambridge Partnership and Form the Future to consult with young people on how to improve the city centre. And that's part of the Shape Your City Urban Design Challenge event, which took place in September 2018. There's a takeover day coming up on the 23rd of November, which is looking particularly at community safety and travel around the city. That's going to be young people, particularly from local secondary schools, and I believe both myself and the Chief Executive are on the panel for that. Looking forward to hearing the ideas that are going to come forward. And there's also a little bit of work in process because CHIPS have supported S106 bids for park improvements at Lichfield Road, Gunhill Close and Trumpington Recreation Ground based on earlier feedback from children in the local area. So those are currently the design consultation phase, but again the young people have been involved in the shaping of those designs.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. CHIPS is something that's very close to my heart. I'm trying to remember when I had some responsibility for CHIPS, but I definitely did. I got to see the boat. I got to spend a lot of time there. Liked the boat. Could the Executive Councillor, Mr. Mayor, please give us a little bit of a broader update on CHIPS, perhaps especially what it's got planned for the winter months with half-term coming up?
Thank you. So I've been having a variety of meetings with the leadership team at CHIPS. They've got some great plans coming forward and always thinking about particularly how we can make sure that we're targeting our work best to those young people who really need it. But what I also really like about their approach is it's never kind of shutting anyone out. It's always really inclusive, and I really love that. There's loads of stuff coming up that CHIPS are involved in coming up in half term. I'm only sorry I'm not going to be around to be able to come and see some of it because it looks really amazing. So there are things like storytelling and drumming with Iroko Theatre Company, and I'm told that no previous experience of drumming is necessary for this. There's family crafts and treasure trails at Nuns Way. There's pumpkin carving at the Meadows. There's a spooky party at Brownsfield. There's litter picking, again you're seeing a theme here, with soup for tea at Green End Road Recreation Ground. There's autumn's arts and crafts at Story stories field. We've also got some, if I can just stray slightly from chips to look more widely, we've also got a spooky sports session coming up for children aged 8 and over at CRC. And that will include glow-in-the-dark sports and games. No, but it's just wonderful, because this is the kind of thing, everyone enjoys it, it's creative, it's getting young people involved, and I'm just really excited about the work that's going on and really want to thank the team for that.
Well, that concludes the 30 minutes. As I said, those that have not answered may provide a written response to the member who put the question. So we come to agenda item 7. I thought it would be helpful to remind members of the rules of debate on motions. A motion and any amendment will be debated at the same time. This means that members can only speak once in the debate unless they have a right of reply. The only members with a right of reply are the relevant executive councillor and the mover of the principal motion. Movers of amendments do not have a right of reply. The mover and seconder of the principal motion have up to 10 minutes between them. The proposer and seconder of an amendment also have up to 10 minutes between them. All other contributions, including rights of reply, are up to 3 minutes per councillor. When there are amendments and when debate has concluded, I will call for a vote on the amendment, and if carried, there is a second vote on the motion as amended, but with no further debate. So I'll go straight to item 7A. I call on Councillor Johnson to move the motion abolition of section 21 of the Housing Act 1988 on page 2 and 3 of your agenda. A briefing note can be found on page 23 to 20 and 24 of the information pack. I understand Councillor Shield will second. You have 10 minutes between you. Councillor Johnson, please address the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The private rental sector urgently needs reform. British tenants who rent privately have weaker rights compared to renters in most EU countries, and rents as a proportion of income is amongst the highest in Europe. Rising house prices and stagnant pay rises over the last several years have already made a very difficult situation for many families in Cambridge and elsewhere more desperate. Following pressure to act, the government decided to consult on changes to increase the length of fixed-term tenancies from 6 months to 3 years, giving more stability to tenants while still allowing them the flexibility to terminate a tenancy early. Nevertheless, the fact that Section 21 of the 1988 Housing Act was not consulted on is concerning. This element of existing legislation allows a landlord to end a tenancy after a fixed period without providing any reason. This aspect of housing law was not consulted. The fact that this aspect of housing law was not consulted on shows that the government continues to be half-hearted in taking real affirmative action in addressing the imbalance which presently exists in regard to the relative powers held by a landlord compared as opposed to a tenant. We need affirmative action now, because the evidence is compelling in stating that Section 21 evictions contribute to the number of households becoming homeless, with numbers rocketing since the start of the decade. The government's own figures make clear that the ending of a tenancy contributed to 15% of all homeless presentations to local authorities in 2010, rising to 31% by 2017. The present year's figures are not yet available. Our own casework numbers also supports the evidence of there being a significant increase in the numbers being evicted under Section 21, more of which in a moment. There is also evidence to suggest that Section 21 is a sword of Damocles by which tenants do not report faults with their accommodation due to fears that they will be evicted in retaliation. The CAB's own research states that a quarter of all tenants in private rented accommodation do not tell their landlords of problems within a property or request urgent repairs as a result of the powers landlords have to evict under present legislation. It is clear that the public disagree with the principle of no-fault evictions, and so they should, bearing in mind the information just cited. Recent polling carried out by Survation, the most accurate pollster of last year's general election, suggests that only a minority of 20% of all voters and a similar number of Tory voters agree that landlords should continue to evict a tenant without giving them a reason. and over 50,000 people have signed a petition organised by the Generation Rent campaign group and 38 Degrees, calling on the Secretary of State for Housing to abolish Section 21. Plus, there is support on the subject from all political hues. The Conservative Times wrote a leader article this June arguing that the government should legislate to abolish Section 21, and the London Assembly recently passed a motion proposed by the Labour and Green groups. The Scottish Parliament, using their devolved powers, have already abolished Section 21. The Council is doing all it can to mitigate the risks of homelessness to those who are tenants in the private rental sector. Our Housing Advice Service supports those who are threatened with eviction under Section 21. And correlating with the national figures, there has been a significant increase in the number who have approached us in recent years, and it is likely that this caseload will increase further. Amongst other things, our Housing Advice Service informs those affected of their rights and can assist them in exercising their ability to counterclaim against the landlord, which may result in compensation being issued to relieve their homelessness. And of course, those who are homeless as a result of Section 21 have priority in bidding for council properties through HomeLink, where following a short introductory period, they will have a secure tenancy with us. Section 21 does not apply to council tenants. I very much hope that the Council can speak with one voice this evening and unanimously support this motion. It stands to common sense that changes in this area of housing law is urgently needed. Pressure needs to be kept up on the government to act and go further than they have done so to date. So I hope by the leader writing to the Secretary of State, other local authorities will follow us and eventually force a change in the law, giving more rights to the tenants, addressing the imbalance of power which presently is skewed in favour of landlords, and drive up standards, thereby providing stability and security for those who rent privately. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shield, do you wish to speak now, or do you reserve your right?
I would like to reserve my right to the end of the debate, if that's okay.
When you do, you have 5 minutes 20.
Thank you.
Is there any debate? Councillor Cantrell.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I think we all welcome this motion. Cambridge is a city where we know the housing market is broken. People can't afford to buy, let alone afford to rent. And actually in the market where, within the city, rents have gone up by over 15% in the last 3 years, the weight of the market sits in favour of the landlord and not the tenant. And from the work I've done with Shelter nationally, Shelter and Crisis together did a very interesting piece of analysis looking at a sample population of people who were transitioning from homeless into housing. And one of the key things is that actually having some form of medium-term tenancy provides an opportunity of security. It enables you to put down roots. It enables you to make the place where you're living feels like home. And what this motion does is acts as another component to hopefully ensure that the government does address these issues of short-term tenancies, of where people do not feel as though the place where they live is a home. And so from this side of the chamber, Mr. Mayor, we fully support this motion, and we hope that other authorities follow our example in terms of putting pressure on the government.
Does anybody else wish to speak? In that case, I might as well go straight to the vote because it looks like we're in. Oh, sorry, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I probably won't need the full 5 minutes and 20 seconds. But I just wanted to say very briefly why I support what's being proposed here. I have personal experience of eviction, which happened. It was a no-fault eviction. I used to live on Mitchum's corner, and I was also facing redundancy at the time. So I had the double whammy of eviction and redundancy, which I managed to dodge by getting another job just in time. And I'm delighted to tell the Chamber that I was able to find another place to live just in time. However, it was a really scary point in my life, and I was delighted when I read what Councillor Johnson is bringing to you for consideration today. It's been Labour Party policy for some time now, including under our previous leader, to try and bring together something resembling parity with what private tenants enjoy across Europe, where arrangements for tenancies are far stronger and far better, and people have far better protections. And so I'd like to pay tribute not just to our current leader, but also to Ed Miliband. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Richard Johnson for bringing this forward. I do think, just in a general sense, we, all of us, would do well to pay close attention to how private tenants are treated, not just in respect of the arrangements for short-hold tenancies and protections for people under eviction. And I'm glad to see the proposed arrangements for prioritisation in terms of the council housing register, but also in terms of fees that are charged by agencies, often simply to photocopy a piece of paper at the end of the year and sign it again, and that'll be £225, thank you. And so good to pay close attention to that and try and push against it. And also for us all, across all parties, to pay special attention to agencies that are not doing the right thing when it comes to the returning of deposits. Two cases. One is that when I cleaned and scoured the flat that I then moved to, I had to wait exactly 6 months, before getting the £1,500 month and a half in advance plus standard deposit back. And it seemed to me that the agencies were almost gaming the system, knowing the point that how they could hold on to the deposit for that long. I don't really understand why, because that all the money that is put by tenants by way of a deposit is supposed to be held in a separate account specifically for the purpose. But that brings me to my last point. I'm aware that agencies are in some cases simply confiscating those deposits, and I would call on everyone to pay as much attention to what agencies, letting agencies, are doing in this city as to what landlords are doing. Landlords sometimes have a bit of a bad reputation, the big bad landlord, and fine to be mindful of that. But let's not forget that some of the letting agencies, I won't name any names, but some of the letting agencies are getting away with unfair practice, non-return of deposits without any good ground. But I really welcome what's being proposed here in terms of the secure tenancies. And just to clarify, Councillor Richard Johnson will correct me if I've misunderstood, but it is not... This is not going to tie people in. It's not a straitjacket. It is not going to tie tenants into arrangements that they can't, without paying a huge exit fee, get out of. No, that's not what's being proposed here. There are provisions for those people who only require a short tenancy to not to pay through the nose in order to get out of it. But what it does provide, the other way round, is it provides protection for those people who do want to live in one place for a fair amount of time. And so that's everything I've got to say, and thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for bringing this to us. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like the right of reply?
I need to say that it's great that we've got unanimity, if only that the rest of the agenda would be as straightforward.
I will now go to the vote. Oh, I'll now go to the vote. Can I see those in favour of the motions? Thank you. We now turn to agenda item 7B. I call on Councillor Cantrill to move the People's Vote motion found on pages 3 to 5 on your agenda. We don't. Have you a seconder nominated?
We do.
Councillor Goering. I understood well. So now you have 10 minutes between you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brexit, Mr. Mayor, is the most important issue that we will discuss this evening. It impacts on everything else we have talked about in this chamber this evening. The outcome of Brexit will impact housing, will impact the general fund, will impact everything in our way of life across this city. It's perhaps the most important issue that this city and this country has faced for the last 70 years. And like the majority of Cambridge residents, and I think members in the chamber, I'm a passionate European. I was so passionate that during the referendum campaign, I stepped out of party politics and I was a lead campaigner in Cambridge for Europe, along with other politicians of all political colours, including members of the Labour Party and the Green Party, and also people of no political colour who were passionate about the issue. Now, as I've stated before in this chamber, I respect the referendum vote, and I respect those people who voted to leave. The place where I come from voted by approximately 70% to leave, and I understand some of the reasons as to why those people voted in the way they did. But no one in the referendum voted to have less money in their pocket. No one in the referendum voted to have a negative impact on the economy. No one, for example, voted to have a shortage of key medicines like insulin that we will have if we have a chaotic Brexit. So, Mr. Mayor, it is only right that whatever the proposed Brexit deal is, and there is a risk that there may be no deal, there is a risk that we just fall out of the EU at the end of March, and the chaos that that will bring to this country is unimaginable. But assuming there is a proposal, it is only right, Mr. Mayor, that that proposal should be put to the people in a people's vote, with an option to remain in the EU. Now, I believe that the residents of Cambridge want us as politicians to do whatever it takes to deliver that people's vote. Mr. Mayor, with less than 6 months to go to Brexit, time is running out. So this motion is very simple. It's about using the Guildhall to send a message to Whitehall that we, the representatives of the people of Cambridge, are saying to the politicians in Westminster that our people, the people of Cambridge, want a right to a people's vote. And as members will see, there is an amendment to the motion proposed by the ruling group that reflects their motion later on in the agenda. And despite the efforts of myself and Councillor Smith over the course of the last 48 hours, we haven't been able to find a compromise position. And I really feel that's a real shame. I really feel that's a real shame on this really important issue. Because other authorities, particularly the two groups in other authorities, have been able to find a compromise and have been able to vote in unison in relation to the people's vote, as we saw at the County Council yesterday and as we saw a week or so ago in South Cambs. But Mr. Mayor, putting it bluntly, time has run out. Politicians have had 2 years to overcome fudge, to overcome contradiction, to decide which side of the fence you really sit. Unfortunately, I have to say, the amendment still does not give that clarity. It still seeks to fudge. Mr. Mayor, it's very simple. The time has come when there can be no more fudge, no ifs, no buts, no maybes. You either support the people's vote or you don't. It's as simple as that. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to finish, as Cambridge Stays indicated on social media today. It's time for Cambridge City Council to back a people's vote on Brexit with an option to stay in the EU. Not my words, Cambridge Stays. A body of people, a very large body of people in this city, who represent the views of the majority. So I hope, Mr. Mayor, that this chamber will support my motion and support a people's vote.
Councillor Goering, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'd like to reserve my right.
You've got to reserve your right. When you do speak, you have 4 minutes 40. Councillor Smith has given notice of an amendment which is on pages 25 to 27 of the information pack. Councillor Bajent will second the amendment. You have 10 minutes between you. Councillor Smith.
Okay, well, I think it's safe to say the current state of the Brexit negotiations is a shambles. After 2 years and promises of a speedy, easy solution, it's ridiculous that all the Tories have managed to negotiate is a small extension to the transition period, like a lazy school student trying to get an extension on their homework because they spent the weekend watching telly. There's a host of headlines every day affecting businesses, food prices, holidays, workers' rights. Everything is under threat by the shambolic Tory government who have done almost nothing in 2 years to negotiate properly, despite promising us it was all going to be terribly easy. I'm really pleased to be part of a party which saw this coming, which saw the problems all this was going to cause, who realised the whole thing was just a way of Cameron trying to impose authority on his own right wing. I remember the attacks on Ed Miliband not so long ago for not supporting the call for that referendum. I think Ed Miliband was probably proved right, to be honest. As a proud European, as I think we're going to be saying that a lot tonight, but it happens to be true, and to quote Lloyd Russell Moyle, who is the Labour MP for Brighton Kemptown, you will probably have to prise my EU passport out of my cold, dead hand. Not only am I a proud European, but so are the majority of my ward residents, so you might say it's obvious that I will oppose Theresa May's Brexit shambles. But what's noticeable is that increasingly those people who voted leave are equally angry. I'm hearing this on the doorsteps in Cambridge, and I'm also hearing this from friends who are out on the doorsteps in parts of the country who voted leave in very large numbers. As I heard someone say, it's a bit like asking for a cup of tea and then finding someone has burnt your house down to get the hot water. And of course, it's increasingly clear that what was claimed as Project Fear is rather more Project Fact, and I think the extensive introductory bullet points in our amended motion underlines this. And this is such an important issue that both parties have brought a motion, and we've brought motions consistently on several issues in Europe in this chamber because we know how important this is. So our attempt today to produce an amended motion is to bring together both motions in a way that we can then offer something that unites us. So what have we added? Well, we've added a little bit more on the role of Parliament. And I'm fully confident myself that Daniel Zeichner, our MP, will continue his work to represent Cambridge's views in that space. We've added a call for a general election. Now, quite frankly, who would not want to get rid of this horrendous government who are clearly no longer representing the people they serve on Brexit or on any other issue? And on this issue particularly, does anyone in this chamber think the Tories are going to do anything we ask of them on Brexit? Whilst they're in power, we've seen what they can do. Who can object to all parties clearly laying out their position on all issues and having the chance to vote on those things in a general election? I feel like a bit like a school teacher. I can hear voices in the background. And then there's the public vote, including an option to remain, which you will see is there in our motion. Now, for me as a Remainer, I would personally like to see the outcome of that public vote to be a vote for Remain. But whatever the outcome, it's a democratic approach. I'm a union member. When we ask for negotiations on our behalf, we get a say on the results of those negotiations. And as our motion says very clearly, if the government is confident in negotiating a deal that working people, our economy and communities will benefit from, they should not be afraid to put that deal to the public so that all options are on the table, including the option to remain in the European Union. I commend this amendment as a composite of both motions and hope that it will have support in this chamber this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Bayesian, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
Thank you.
You can speak now. You have 5.5 minutes.
Really? I don't need that. I don't need that long. I'd like to commend my colleague for the speech that she made. I'd like to commend my party, actually, for the way it's attempted to provide some unanimity between the two parties. Cambridge, as we know, voted to remain. We voted to remain in numbers in excess of 70%. In my ward, I believe we had the largest vote to remain. I was just checking that everybody was awake, okay?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, that's factually incorrect.
And you were awake as well, good. The amendment that we have made responds to the feelings of the residents of Cambridge, and nobody can argue with that. People in this city want to stay in Europe. It supports our MP, Daniel Zeichner, who has throughout this whole campaign stood solid, even to his own detriment, to represent the people of Cambridge. It is an attempt, as I said, to create a unanimity with the party opposite. So I'm happy to second this amendment, Chair.
Is there any debate? Councillor McGurty, to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the aftermath of the devastating EU referendum result in June 16, the Liberal Democrat Party adopted as its central policy on the EU the demand that the people of the UK should have the final say on any deal before we leave the EU. And the reason for that is because, far from representing what's been widely and illogically described as the will of the people over and over, the will expressed by that hairline victory is that as a nation, perhaps we are not really sure. We should provide people with more and accurate detail, having negotiated our actual position, and then come back to the people for a confirmatory referendum and make sure that that is what we actually mean. This is a policy which, of course, was initially derided in the media and by dogmatic Leave supporters, but which has made more and more sense to level-headed people in the UK as the intractable problems of actually leaving have gradually been worked through and exposed. But far from clinging to that policy for shallow political gain, the Liberal Democrats helped form and wholeheartedly joined the People's Vote movement. And this is the cross-party progressive movement that this country and Cambridge yearns for to bring about the end of the divisive politics that has grown up around this issue. Which is why it pains me to see that infighting and reshuffles within Cambridge Labour Party have resulted in a cynical amendment which utterly fails to represent the people of Cambridge. amending out of existence the words people's vote as the central tenet of this motion, and inserting instead a self-serving demand for their glorious leader to become the Prime Minister. Do you seriously think that I'm going to vote to replace one economic disaster with another? Holding a general election as the arbiter of the issue of Brexit makes absolutely no sense. Brexit is not your golden ticket to Downing Street. It is the most serious issue faced by this country in generations and will be for generations. And asking people to choose between one hard Brexit party and another does not address the issue. And for the constant attempts to fudge the issue with sleight of hand and whispered half promises that all options might be on the table, but only if Comrade Jeremy can have a go in number 10, are absolutely shameful at a time when the UK so desperately needs a functioning opposition party. And the British public will not understand, nor easily forgive, the party who stood aside and cheered on the Tories from the Brexit sidelines.
Councillor Benstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and what a good time to stand up for me to speak, actually, because we've just been given a demonstration of exactly where the Liberal Democrats stand, not just on Brexit, but on the whole government of this country. The Liberal Democrats would rather see Theresa May's government continue. Theresa May's government have been allegedly negotiating Brexit for the last 2 years that looks so bad they make Neville Chamberlain in diplomacy look like King Solomon. They would rather have that than have the chance of voting that Tory government out in a general election if there was a vote in Parliament that voted down the Tories' proposals for Brexit, and that could be converted into a vote of no confidence in the government. We can see what the Liberal Democrats would do under those circumstances, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrats would do the same as they did in 2010. They will prop up the Tories.
Councillor Deal.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously this is a very serious matter, but I hope you can forgive a certain whimsy. Thinking about the EU, it struck me that in some ways it's a bit like a horse in that it doesn't always do what we want it to. It occasionally bites us. It does cost money and it does require quite a lot of mucking out. However, at the same time, it does actually bring huge rewards for that effort. It's a special relationship. It helps us to travel, to make new friends, and it shares our burdens. Now, to extend the analogy, it feels like 2 years ago, a bunch of cowboys turned up and convinced our grandparents to get rid of the horse on the promise of some kind of mythical beast that would do everything the horse could do, but without any of the work or any of the mucking out. It would also even look like the horse, but with an ornate horn and a multicoloured mane. Now, 2 years on, it is becoming quite apparent that such rainbow unicorns do not exist, and I think all of us would like the opportunity to rethink that decision. Now, our motion does offer that opportunity through a people's vote, which does have multicoloured cross-party support. The amendment focuses on a general election, but we had a general election in 2017, and the Labour National Party kept promising to deliver Brexit. They promised a Brexit that would keep us in the single market, that would keep us in a customs union, would control immigration, but would also create jobs. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, called that one a workers' Brexit. It's currently a sensible Brexit. But let's be very honest what it was, what it is. It is a rainbow unicorn Brexit, because like rainbow unicorns, it only exists in the minds of toddlers like Boris Johnson. Now, a rerun of such a general election will only cost more time. Now, this amendment, whatever the intentions, only serves to undermine support for the people's vote, our best and most likely way to stop Brexit. Now, if Brexit happens, and I will keep working to try and stop it, then sadly it will be partly due to the talented and passionate campaigners like Councillor Smith opposite, looking to build party solidarity and looking to prioritise the Labour Party over their own city and their own country. I just please beg you to, like the British people, change your minds, withdraw this amendment, let's support a people's vote, we'll see you on Saturday and we can go and help force this thing to happen and help stop Brexit. Thank you.
Councillor Nessinger.
I'm incredibly disappointed that Labour in the city have chosen to amend this motion in the way that they have. I've spent most of today at the Local Government Association hearing about some of the contingency planning that is being done to prepare for a no-deal Brexit. And the implications of a no-deal Brexit are horrific. You won't be surprised to know that I have always felt Brexit was a terrible idea. The UK at present has an incredibly good deal with the European Union. We have full voting rights and full political representation. We have full access to markets, but we have various opt-outs on a wide range of policies and a financial rebate. How could a relationship which gives us no say on the future of EU rules and less access to markets possibly be better than what we have now? However, the horrors being described in the event of a no-deal Brexit took even me by surprise. The impact on the UK ports of having checks on the EU side of the channel are massive. The delay in getting vehicles off ferries on the EU side is likely to mean that rather than 9 ferry crossings within 12 hours, only 3 are possible. The implications of this alone, quite apart from a myriad of other issues on visas, police cooperation, power supplies and medicines, are just huge, and the hit to the UK economy is horrendous. We must find a way out of this mess, and a vote on the final options would be clear and democratic. For Cambridge City Labour to be failing to back that campaign is incredibly disappointing, and for them to be using a motion, an amendment on this motion, on this incredibly important issue, which is just so much more important than party politics, to be making a whole bunch of dubious party political claims about the record of their leader is just pathetic. The Labour group on the County Council had more guts on Tuesday when they unanimously supported a people's vote with no caveats. I'm just really, really sorry that the members opposite are not willing to have their courage.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. It seems that the members opposite haven't read our amendment. It is very clear, because a lot of it is in bullet points, so you don't even have to read very much. No-deal Brexit should be rejected as a viable option by Parliament. Should Parliament vote down a Tory Brexit or the talks end in no deal, we should have an immediate general election. And then the final bullet point, I think someone's already read it out, and it's written here. Do we need to say it again? But it says the option of a public vote. La 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 la. So that all options are on the table, including the option to remain in the European Union. Oh, okay, I'll read it all out. If a general election does not follow, all options remain on the table, including the option of a public vote. Public vote. If the government is confident in negotiating a deal that working people, our economy and communities will benefit from, they should not be afraid to put that deal to the public, so that all options are on the table, including the option to remain in the European Union. That's very clear to me. Now, the referendum was not binding. It was an advisory referendum. On the rare occasion that the Leavers showed any sign that they'd thought through what they were campaigning for, they campaigned for a soft Brexit. They said we would stay in the single market, we would stay in the customs union. This Tory government have chosen to follow an advisory referendum which they only just scraped through, and they're actually not even sticking to what the Brexiteers campaigned on. They're making a much harder Brexit. So to suggest that only a public vote or a people's vote on this is enough, it simply isn't. Unlike the members opposite, we over here, sorry if I think I can speak for you all in saying, we do not trust this Tory government to do anything. They are totally destroying this country, not only through Brexit, but through austerity. Brexit is massive, but so is what they're doing to this country, to the NHS, to education, to everything. So that is why we are calling for Parliament to reject the no deal, a general election, and also a public vote. Thank you.
Councillor Dryden.
Well, if we get the people's vote, that comes about, and we get a general election, your leader has already said he wouldn't work with Labour, so that means you'll probably have a return ticket to get into number 10, like you did last time. You got into bed with the Tories, so how can we trust you as well as the Tories? I mean, with the problems we've got today, with your coalition is still affecting the country now. I mean, the bedroom tax for one, you agree with that. So you sit there like you're going to do this and that, but you're just like the Tories anyway, and you're saying, and you tell stories like the Tories. We can't believe you what you're saying.
Councillor Beck.
Mr Mayor, to anyone who feels worried, concerned, threatened, outraged, angry about the proposition that we should leave the EU, they would weep if they realised the amendment that has been brought to the motion that Councillor Cantrell has proposed. The two most salient points of difference in this are the deletion of the paragraph, "This council believes that the interests of its residents would be best protected by a people's vote on the terms of leaving the EU with the possibility of rescinding Article 50 and remaining in the EU." That is what you want to delete. That's one of the salient 2 points. The other is the inclusion of "This council supports the actions of the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn MP." Well, I ask you, if you have been listening to the people of Cambridge who are concerned about leaving the EU, you will know that the very focal point of their frustration and their anger is the failure of the man, Jeremy Corbyn, Leader of the Opposition in this country, for the abysmal leadership he has provided for people who want to remain in the European Union. And by the way, to Councillor Bajent, the amendment that is proposed here does say nothing, actually, in support of the views of people of Cambridge who don't want to leave the EU. I've scanned the words. It doesn't talk about that. It describes different types of Brexit that you might not like, and the government who you don't like managing it. But I've heard, and we've all heard, the leader of your party say that it's about conducting Brexit in a good way. And the people of Cambridge don't believe there is a good way. That's how they voted. And that's the outcome that I think they want to see. Mr Mayor, I think that members opposite, and I really regret this, seem to be living in some sort of cocoon of their own making, of splitting every difference, muddling every choice on Brexit to try and point both ways at the same time. On the biggest and most fundamental issue facing the people of this country in probably our lifetimes, the major opposition of this country has no clear compass in the way it would like to lead this country. And you can read it in the tortuous sections of your amendment that is the case. The answer is the same answer that your colleagues took on the County Council earlier this week, when they agreed to second and support a motion saying something very similar to the motion you have today, and in fact the same words were offered to you by Councillor Cantrell as a replacement this evening. It was the source of agreement at the County Council. So what is it with you guys that you simply have to disagree on this subject?
Councillor Gillespie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Cantrell has claimed that Brexit is the most important issue to affect the city in the last 70 years. Councillor Bick says that it's the biggest, most fundamental issue facing us. I don't agree, because although Brexit does threaten hunger, loss of jobs, homelessness, conflict breaking out. It threatens climate change, but climate change threatens us much more than Brexit does. In a fundamental way, it threatens extinction of human life, billions of climate migrants. Climate change...
Can we stick to the subject, please, Councillor Gillespie?
I'm refuting a point in the argument. Although I agree that, Brexit is very important, I don't think it is the most important issue. The amendment. Labour seem to be amending everything this evening. I'm surprised they're not amending the motto. The amendment seems unnecessary. There's another motion making the point that you want to make. I'll be supporting the original purpose of this vote because I think the wording of the people's vote is somewhat important to challenge the falsehood that a disaster Brexit is something that's wanted by the majority. I don't think the people do want the Brexit that the government is negotiating. And it's creditable to even call it negotiating, because what they seem to be doing is again and again refusing to acknowledge the difficulties facing Brexit, refusing to engage with the negotiators, abusing the member states of the EU in public, failing to plan and apparently planning to fail. So a people's vote, as I see it, is giving the people a chance to ratify a decision that they made earlier on, a chance to say, yeah, we still want it, in the same way that the government would ratify a decision after it had been to the House of Lords, or ratify a decision after undertaking consultation or research by the civil servants. It's actually respecting the will of the people by giving them another chance to say what they want. And the amendment, by taking out the people's vote wording, undermines the campaign, I think. Another general election may be helpful to the country. I'm not sure that Labour are underestimating the importance that the Progressive Alliance played in the last election and the chances of winning another general election. I think that they'll have to do significantly more this time to make a case for winning the election in the midst of a confusing position on Brexit that voters will find it hard to back.
Councillor Smart.
I'd just like to pick Councillor Cantrell up on what he actually said at the start on his motion, the mover of the motion. He said, it's the most important issue we'll discuss tonight. Well, it is very important for sure, and but it is a motion, and this is a district council. So I've lost my line now. What is important is the business we did before the break, local plan, the Treasury management, general fund and more. We do not decide this matter, Parliament does. He says he wants to use the Guildhall to send a message to Whitehall. Well, actually, what he wants to do is to use the Guildhall to get him elected to Parliament. And just in case they've forgotten, the Lib Dems called on the government to have a referendum in 2010. And at that time, at a time when the great Eurosceptic William Hague was not even in favour of a referendum, they wanted one.
Councillor Pippas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Smith that Cameron shouldn't have really called for a Brexit just to please his right wing. But based on my humble opinion, at that time, if the Labour was a disorganised leadership and they took a strong stance, and Jeremy Corbyn did not sit on the fence and he said, right, this is the way we're going to go about it, the result would be very different than today, and I wouldn't be having this conversation. I am pretty certain the remainders who have won. And I, as a local business person, I'm already suffering from the results, and the Brexit hasn't happened. My cleaners have said to me, there's no future in this country. I employed these people for 15 years, and they went back to their countries because there's no future. The average person, when they go on holiday to Spain, they're going to be paying international phone calls. Now they can phone as if they're in the UK, and all these other things. So please support us. Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We were asked just now by Councillor Moore if we'd read this amendment. I have read the amendment. I'm going to read a few phrases from it. A no-deal Brexit should be rejected. Should Parliament vote down a Tory Brexit, all the talks end in no deal. And it proposes that if the government is competent in negotiating something, it should put that to the people. I don't want to oppose a no-deal Brexit. I want to oppose Brexit, period. My colleagues want to oppose Brexit, period. Your county council colleagues want to oppose Brexit, period. Please join us. Send a message, bollocks to Brexit.
Councillor Goering, you have the right of reply. You have 4 minutes 40.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we had yet again a Brexit debate, and I think everybody by now knows what I think about Brexit. My thinking has evolved. I think it's going to be much worse than anyone predicts. If you've heard Sir Ivan Rogers on Monday and read his speech, you would have seen that a very senior civil servant predicts currency markets to absolutely collapse, the balance of payment of this country to go through the roof. The Minister for Food Shortages being called on to act and try to rescue the most vulnerable. And at the same time, this Labour amendment might foster the unity between the 2 or 3 hardcore Corbynites on the benches opposite and the rest of the reasonable Labour Party, including Daniel Zeigner. I think if you ask Daniel, he wouldn't stand for this. He would call it a people's vote. And you are kind of betraying him by taking out that particular term, because it is much more than just a party political kind of spat. It is now a movement that we can either support as a city council or we don't. Because what the Tory government will do, mark my words, is they're going to come with the deal on the 20th of March. And then they're going to say, so take it or leave it. There will be no time for a general election. There will be no time for calling a people's vote. There will be no time for anything but absolute disaster or what the Tories will have negotiated. I can assure members opposite that if you support the people's vote, and if it goes the way I hope it goes, you would have a new general election, you would have a new government in no time at all. But to hope for a general election, maybe not be called, to leave it in the hands of the Tory government to get this meaningful vote, which they just reneged on yesterday, is trusting the government to do the right thing. And I think we are beyond that point, right? Civil servants in Brussels briefed other EU member states yesterday that there was no time for a people's vote, there was no time for a general election. It's now whatever Theresa May negotiates or crashing out with all the drastic consequences. And I must say, I think those of you who are going to demonstrate on Saturday, going to go on the march, going to support Daniel Zeigner and the people's vote, should not support this amendment. You should put in the words, the people's vote. Thank you.
We'll now call on the on Councillor Herbert for his right to reply, followed by Councillor Cantrell.
So it's quite clear from the amendment, which is largely a reiteration of a motion, because there were two motions before the council tonight, that a referendum is an option on the table. It's not, as Councillor McGurty said, and he was wrong, because Councillor McGurty said that having a vote was dependent on Labour winning a general election. The word, well, you did say that, Councillor McGurty. The wording of this is quite clear, that an option of a referendum is proposed. But where I haven't heard a single word from Councillor Cantrell or any people on the other side of the chamber, Mayor, is actually who's going to decide whether there's going to be a referendum. That will be decided by Parliament. And that is why whatever the mess is that's going to come out of the Tory party in terms of a proposal, and the Labour Party is not a hard Brexit party, Councillor McGurty. It never was and it never will be. Whatever comes out as that option will be put to Parliament. And it's only going to be at that stage that there will be a decision on a referendum. Nobody in this chamber decides whether there's going to be a referendum. So that is why in front of you is a motion which actually says that if there isn't a general election, the Labour Party will want a second vote. Councillor Cantrell lightly talks, Mayor, about the people from Derbyshire and other parts of the country. It isn't enough just to say that we're going to suddenly change their minds. There has to come out of Parliament a set of issues and decisions that actually get to them like the threat of coming out of the EU gets to a lot of us in Cambridge. And that is certainly, I haven't heard anything from your side which would actually communicate to a lot of the people who need to change their minds if you're going to win that vote, and if we're going to win such a vote, which a lot of us would want to happen. So your approach ignores the fact that Parliament has to get to the point where there's going to be